You're allowed.
Yes, I am.
Shut it, you pair. We are live. Hello, welcome to this week's Midweek Geek. I am the old geek, and tonight we're going to be talking about resource management. And I can see 16 people waiting already.
Woohoo!
16 of you. With nothing better to do on a Wednesday evening, because it is Wednesday evening. So I'm just going to. You've been busy in chat already, and of course, there's one person who likes to poke the hornet's nest whenever they're in chat. He goes by one single initial. I'm hoping I'm coming through nice and clearly because I've moved all my computer stuff around. And yeah, look, it's your own fault. You should know that world time, the basis for world time
is Britain.
UTC or GMT is the time by which all others are measured. It is as simple as that.
As Al Murray said,
Well, if you bloody English weren't so insufferable that our ancestors didn't want to flee the
I was going to actually agree with you there, Geek, but fine. I'll just keep my goddamn mouth shut.
Right, but say we are the time by which all your times are measured. So yeah, look, it's your own fault. It's your own fault. So
we did that as a courtesy.
So hello to Crafting Gamer, hello to Doof, hello to Elfbait, who will be joining us in a bit, and I believe Saxius will be joining us a bit as well, and which does leave one more spot. Hello to Halakar, and hello to Jake Actual, and Grumpy Old Slan, looks like he's back from vacation, or holiday as we call it in this country. Tibble Hoaxy, Tybal Hoaxy, Tybal Tibble, Tibble Tybal. May join chat as well. Hoaxy has become tabletop. So, right. Double accounts.
You might say it was a hoax.
Hey! Hello, Storm
There.
Piglet. Hello, Wayne's World.
Is that better, Doof?
Yes.
Is that better, Doof?
We checked DK's loudness early on, and it was coming through okay. I mean, it might just be DK being loud rather than his mic now, because you get excited, don't you, DK? You get excited.
Yes, I do.
You're allowed to get excited. There's nothing wrong with that.
Learn mic etiquette, so you know you to sit back when you know you're going to get loud.
That's
you
true,
think
yes.
so, Doof. You think so, Doof. Wow, great. Glad to know you have such an empirical measurement on this.
The thing is, Straw Piglet, I would not have you sleeping during the day and working at night, because it would change the meaning of the word day for you. Anyway, we're going to be talking about resource management, but first, we're going to have a little chat about games that we've played this week. No Call of Cthulhu on Thursday, because that campaign is finished. I'm going to work on something for later in the year. Saturday, we played some OSE in the afternoon, and then some MERP in the evening. Mage, do you play in the OSE game? You did. I'll let you talk about that one. You do remember it, don't you?
I vaguely. It was a long day for me. Let me see. So I remember I had to leave early because I had my AD&D game. So that was Gene's game. Yes. Okay. It's coming back to me now. Gene's game. Learn my wizard. Yes. We went exploring. Oh, yes. We got into a fight with that big cultist. I put most of the group to sleep, then left as you guys had to clean up the mess because I had to go. Yes. And apparently you won. We earned some XP. I'm closing in on level 2 as a mage in OSE, which is nice. I think you leveled, didn't you, or you're close?
No, I reached a milestone, which is the halfway point to level 2.
Got it. Yes, okay.
Welcome to the danger zone.
Yeah.
It's not welcome to. It's highway 2.
There we go. I am in the. As you get closer to level 2, you get nervous, don't you?
You gonna die. You gonna die.
Especially when you're on the cusp of getting new hit points.
Yogi might become a little bit timid for the next few sessions. But in the evening, we played some MERP, and I'm playing some scenarios that I've adapted out of 2 MERP modules, Roses of Blackwood and Raiders of Cardalan. all set in the same part of the world. I've moved a few bits around and I've changed a few bits and bobs, as you do. But the inspiration that's in those adventures is fantastic. And there's the Wosies are getting a bit full of themselves. And at the end of the session, they found out that the Wosies are now blaming have had a key member of their society kidnapped by some rogue humans, but they blame all humans for it. And thus the party now have to somehow deal with this. Because they're protecting a settlement that's on the edge of the forest that's got Wosies in it. And they're starting to be threatening. And that's Sean's phone, I think.
Yeah, it's my phone. Sorry, I'll mute.
We have a doof. We have a doof joining us. Hello, doof.
Okay. Hello, sir.
Yes. So, Tonka Todd's in chat as well. Hello, Tonka Todd. And Monday we played a bit more of the Greek theme thingy that a friend of mine's winning for 5th edition.
Otheros.
Yeah. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And that's been my gaming. So, Sean.
Well, as you know, OSE, my vague memory, allows me to say that I was a wizard. I cast sleep, and woohoo, I did my job. After that, of course, I had to leave early because my people for my AD&D 1E campaign started coming. So now, you guys are familiar with Misdemeanor Keep?
Yes.
Vaguely.
Okay. So for those not in the know, the Beckme box set, the red box set, comes with a starter adventure for DMs, a learner adventure for DMs, where they key the first level. Then the second level, they give you a map, and you're meant to key it. And then the third level, you're meant to create. And the idea is you're hunting
carrier crawler hiding near the entrance.
Yes, that's exactly it. And they're supposed to be hunting Bargle. So I am putting my now this is meant for first level characters. I'm putting my first edition group of on average 5th level characters through this scenario where they're hunting Bargle. I've beefed up Bargle, but I've left the scenario pretty much otherwise as is. Anyway, so they camp out, they clear out the kobolds, and they camp out in Misdemeanor. And then late at night, they hear this song, this gorgeous, beautiful melodic song, because they hadn't found the harpies. And so the harpies are basically going. So they got this great situation where the paladin failed his saving throw, and he's being sort of just kind of meandering towards the harpies. And he was the one on watch. So the paladin's player has a ranger henchman, so he basically took over the ranger henchman, and he's using his ranger henchman to grapple the paladin to hold him in place, but the paladin has an 1890 strength, so it's not going very well. Then half the rest of the group, they manage to wake up, and some of them make their save, some not. So half the group is being lured to these harpies, and the other half is trying to figure out what they can do. So it turned into this big brawl. It was great. They defeated the harpies, but not before their pack mule, which was also drawn in by the song, and one of their NPC cleric henchmen were killed. So that was funny. They were like, "This is a first level adventure." It nearly did in a 5th level group. It was great. So they made their way down. They had cleared out the kobolds and routed them, but they hadn't found their way to Bargle's lair. So this session, they went all the way down to the 3rd level to Bargle's lair. And of course, I'm using for the bottom level, the Misdemeanor Keep from Dungeon Magazine. They had reprinted it for 3rd ed and just reconvert it to 1st ed stats. So they fought a couple of shadows. That wasn't a problem. There were some zombies, but the 6th level cleric is able to disintegrate those, not a problem. What they not anticipating were all the traps all over the place and 2 doppelgangers in Bargle's employ. So the doppelgangers making themselves look like Bargle and basically hitting and running and me leading him on a merry chase. They're like, this isn't right. He's not casting spells.
The expecting modules could be brutal, couldn't they? They really could be brutal.
Well, the bottom level was designed for 3rd ed, right? So I had to do some conversions because they gave kobolds 22 hit points and stuff like that. Yeah, that's a little high. But I kept the monsters. I just changed the stats, right? But it's funny, they haven't figured out that they're doppelgangers. I'm not concerned that anybody's watching the stream from my group. I don't think so. If not, well, whatever. They'll figure it out soon enough. So that's been fun. So we left off with the doppelgangers leading them into a battle with basically a golem, and they're like, "Oh crap!" And so swords are drawn. The dwarf broke his magical axe trying to chop through a reinforced door, and now they have to fight this golem. They're capable of doing it, but
breaking of an axe will come to the topic of the chat tonight.
The resource management. Yep.
Resource management. Yes.
So so that was my that was tabletop role playing game. On Sunday I did a day of Firefly. If you know the Firefly board game, which is a lot of fun. Not role playing, but it's if you've enjoyed the Firefly TV show, the game is actually really good. It's an okay game if you're not, but it really adds to it if you're familiar with the world of the show. It's a lot of fun. So that was my gaming weekend. Oh wait, no, I played Fifth Ed on Monday. So I'm gonna occupy your whole screen telling everybody about my D&D games. Yeah.
Keep the Fifth Ed one short. We want to keep people in chat.
We played Fifth Ed. It was fun.
There you go. Right, DK. Any games at the weekend?
No, I played Amber Diceless on Monday. Well, technically it starts at 12 a.m. my time, so it would be Tuesday, but it was fun. We didn't do a whole heck of a lot. Because we were just really starting into the game. It was only like session 2. So, it was fun. I didn't unfortunately get to play Stonehell again over the weekend because work. So that was fun. But hopefully this weekend I'll be able to play again. So,
And Doof, any games for you?
I've run 3 games of AD&D this past week, and in one of them I got to try just pure Appendix A, like just using Appendix A for a dungeon, which was interesting.
That's the dungeon generation. That's the dungeon generator. Yeah,
it's
a lot of weird long corridors. I liked it.
Yeah, I love it. I love solo playing with that thing. Just create a game and it keeps you tight with the rules, and you come up with a dungeon. It's fantastic. I
think I definitely need to use some Appendix A inspiration for my dungeons. They need more corridors, definitely.
More twists and turns and dead ends to have them people fruitlessly tapping. There's got to be a secret door. There's got to be a secret door. There's a gap.
Yeah, Just imagine a dungeon where one corridor is just 200 feet long, and then it takes a sharp turn for like 30 feet, and then loops back in. It'd just be weird to see, like, if you got a really, really, really long corridor.
You can do that with that generator.
Yeah,
you can go all over the place, Cool. So we've all played some games, which is the whole point of the hobby is to play games.
Exactly.
Even though you may think we sit here all the time talking about it, but we do actually play games.
We are not no games.
No, we're not no gamers. No. We have gaming experience. And so resource management. Now, for me, resource management is at the core of any RPG. Absolutely.
The game. It's the entire game.
It is the entirety of the game.
Yeah.
We've gone that far, but it's important.
But resource management and role play, and I think resource management can be split into 2 categories. You've got game mechanic sort of power resource management, and you've got object resource management. I'm talking in terms of the characters here. And certainly I think in recent years there's been a shift, and that is away from managing objects and more towards managing character powers. And I think key to the older school style of play is that idea that resource management leans mostly towards managing objects, with the exception of spellcasters. Now, so I've got here, I mean, game powers are things like spells, abilities, and hit points. And obviously hit points has been in throughout. But there's less emphasis now on managing hit points in games where you can heal more quickly, where you can recover from 0 hit points very, very quickly.
Take 2 aspirin, take a long rest.
Yeah. So in older games, it was a very precious resource. You are so precious over those hit points. My fighter, Yogi, armor class 2, 6 hit points at first level. And when Gene rolled that d6 for damage to me, when he got hit in combat, I was sat there going, don't roll the 6. Please don't roll the 6. Please don't roll. Please, because that
rolled the 6.
No, he rolled 4.
Dead.
So Yogi stood to fight another day. But to me, the only real resource management you have in 5th edition, because even spells, spellcasters can fall back on cantrips. So many more characters have spells and spell-like abilities. 5th edition is more like managing character abilities. You can do this once per short rest. You can do this once per long rest. Those are the keys in 5th edition. And I think that takes a lot away from the feel of the game, because I like the idea where resource management leans towards managing your wealth, because it's important, managing your food, your water, your ammunition. These are aspects of the world that help immerse you in the game world, help you pay attention to what is going on in the game world. It's gone from a focus on the game world to a focus on the character. And I think there should be a bit more of a balance between the two. That's my spiel. My spiel on my intro towards resource management. Any sort of general thoughts from you guys?
I definitely think it's a diminished art in modern games. And people want to get to the meat. They want the excitement. I just want the cinematic action. Counting my food for the week or keeping track of my ammunition. That's boring stuff. I just want fun. I don't agree with it, but I see where people are, especially more casual players, will have that mentality.
I enjoy the nitty gritty.
If
you're playing first edition as close to rules as written as possible. You try, but how strict are you on resource management in terms of torches and all that?
I try to be as strict as possible without my players leaving.
Yeah,
pretty much. But helmets and armor bulk are definitely a factor, if I say so.
And so they should be. So armor bulk is one of those slightly sort of complicated rules where armor has weight and bulk, and
the mechanics are not written that well. Once I kind of rewrote them for my players just so that they could understand more easily, and that helped a lot.
Yeah, you're right. The mechanics aren't
the entire mechanic is just that you basically have the 4 tiers of encumbrance that determine your speed and initiative surprise factor. You cannot drop into tier 3 unless you have bulky armor, and that's it.
Yeah, so you've done your own thing.
The coin weight is plate mail and splint mail mostly, isn't it? There are others, but
there's non-bulky, semi-bulky, and bulky.
I have to say one thing. Hello, Fiore. It has been a month since I saw you. How are you? Sorry.
In first edition, at least, the coin-based encumbrance system accounts for bulk. It's kind of a loose abstraction for bulk. So you don't. When they moved to second ed and everything moved to pounds, they created this whole other bulk system. But the idea behind the coin weight was that it also represents loosely bulk. Like a two-handed sword, which weighs 250 coin, isn't, a 25-pound sword isn't practical, right? So that weight is also considering the fact that you have to carry it with two hands, or it's hard to. You can't just sheath it at your side; it'll drag because it's 6 feet long. That kind of thing. So then you've got the armor itself. They've got their own bulk system, but that really only determines the movement rate. Like semi-bulky armor, you're capped at 9. Bulky armor, you're capped at 6. Generally speaking, there might be an outlier or two, but that's generally the way it goes.
Yeah, I mean,
I understand. As I understand it, it works together with the encumbrance system, which means that you'll also get a surprise penalty.
Yes, yeah, it negates your dexterity modifier. Absolutely, except for you keep your defensive bonus in combat, but you lose the reaction adjustment, which can be really punitive. That's why leather armor is really beneficial for high dex characters, even if they're fighters. If you have a dex of 18, you want to keep that leather armor because then you get your reaction adjustment against surprise. But even slightly bulky armor completely negates that.
And this is where sort of the character resources interact with the overall game mechanics. And it's in old school games. It's supposed to. You are supposed to see your movement rate drop as you pick up more stuff. You're supposed to see your characters start to suffer if you not had a rest 10 minutes every hour or a meal or something like that. And all of that, it's in there. You're meant to keep track of it. You're meant to track those 20 arrows in your quiver. And
ammunition especially.
Yeah. Let's go. Hello to Bear. Hello to Ian. Good to see you chaps in chat. And certainly when I was running 5th edition, it was like trying to get blood from a stone, trying to get the player characters to pay attention to what they were carrying.
Try telling a 5th ed group you're going to be running variant encumbrance from the player's handbook and watch the tears flow.
These rules are in 5th edition.
They are, yeah.
You have limits,
but they don't use them.
Well, the default is video game rules. You have your carrying capacity, and you have full movement until you cross that line by even an ounce, and then you're immobile.
Well, that's not even true. Most games don't even have that, to be honest. They just I know that, but yeah, like the one is like the Skyrim effect where it's like Bethesda games have it, but most other games just have a space maximum. It's not like, oh, you reach a maximum and you can't move. It's just you just can't carry anymore.
Right,
they don't even put the consequence.
Video games, but the point is, like in 5th ed, the default encumbrance system is that you can carry your full carrying capacity with no impediment until you're like 1 pound over, and then you're immobile. I use the variant encumbrance. The variant encumbrance in 5th ed is actually good. It's simple. It's not maybe not realistic, but it's simple and it's punitive enough that characters have to consider what they're carrying.
But I mean, what hasn't helped is, the default 5th edition character sheet has such a minuscule section for equipment.
Right.
And even though the rules list off lots of there's loads of interesting equipment in there, along with how much the weight and everything and what it does, and lots of things in there to add flavor. But that tiny piece on the bottom of the character sheet just means it gets forgotten, and it takes the importance out of it.
Well, here's the other thing that I noticed. That the biggest resource that people don't have in 5e is health management. Like health is not.
I mentioned that
in old school, like even health was a resource, all of it. Like every time you fell down a pit trap, every time you failed in a combat, every time you went into a dungeon without fully healing yourself, like you were taking a risk. Nowadays, you don't have that anymore. And it's just
true, yeah. It is true because at low levels, low level 5th edition is still pretty perilous. Once you get to 3rd or 4th level, though,
but that's why most of them say I don't want to play at 1st level. Gee, that sounds exciting. But like like I remember one time when I was playing, I think I was playing a 5th or 6th level cleric in Aaron the Pedantic's game, and I got swarmed by 3 or 4 Sturges, and I got down to like 2 hit points, and I just tapped him out. I was like, you know what? No, this is too risky. I'm gonna bring in my new character. Or I think I left that night after that point. I don't remember. And they found a dragon's hoard, and they killed a dragon with a potion of gaseous form. And I was like, "Oh, that's unfortunate. I could have got treasure." But then I realized, in hindsight, I was like, "Yeah, I could have gotten a lot of treasure, or my character could be dead." So I think in the end, I made the right choice. You know, and that's kind of the thing with resource management: making the right choices. Because if you make the wrong one, you're dead. And if your choices don't matter, or rather, if there's no consequences to your choices, then your choices don't matter.
And there you have one of the issues is consequence for choices. If you're not running with available mechanics, and the mechanics are there in 5th edition, as Mage said, they get ignored, and they tend to be hand waved away, which takes away the consequences of not taking food, not having water, being gung ho in fights because you know you can heal, you know your bard can just go ping and you're back on your feet again. And when you take away those consequences, it changes the playstyle. And okay, it's a different playstyle to what we old school players prefer. And that's why there is very much a clash between mentalities, between the modern mentality and the old school mentality. And we role play. We role played. And if you've ever heard me running Call of Cthulhu, there's a hell of a lot of role playing going on. It's 95% of it is talking in character, and I'd consider myself old school. I consider a Call of Cthulhu is a dangerous game in the old school vein. Characters can die in an instant, and those sort of things. It's not either or. You can have this degree of detail in terms of resources, managing the minutiae, and you can role play a character. It's not either or. You're not confined to one or the other, and that's where a wedge sometimes gets drawn between us all.
I don't think 5e is designed for long-term resource management. I don't think that works.
No, it's not. It's heroic. It's heroic fantasy. That's what it is.
I mean, it's clearly designed for you to be relentless as a DM.
Yes.
It wants you to have like 5 real combat encounters every day for it to
but
work.
that was what the intent was at the start of the design. By the time we get past, by the time we're at Tasha's, that entire ethos is entirely gone. It's gone. They don't want you to have really challenging encounters anymore. They just don't, because the player base doesn't want that shit. You know.
Okay.
But I'll actually bring this up just as a question. How do you guys feel about classes as a resource?
In terms of
party composition, the fact that your choice of class is a resource.
I guess that's characters as a resource, which I think works. It works pretty well if you have a large entourage of characters.
I think too many people think that way. I think too many people let their game be guided by, oh, we need a wizard, oh, we need a cleric, oh, you've got to be the thief, or what have you. I always try to encourage people, just play the class you want to play, and then figure it out. Adjust your play, or hire NPCs to make up the slack or whatever.
I will say, if you're doing a more say role play centric, but still leaning into dungeon delving, then that's fine. But in the games that I'm leaning into nowadays, where the emphasis is on the dungeon delving, I think if you have the option, right, to play, say, Because I do 4 die sticks in order, and you put that 18. You have an 18 in strength, and you don't play a fighter. I think you're kind of doing a disservice to the party. But this is all contingent on the fact if you're going for strict dungeon delving. Like that's like the key focus.
That's gaming the system, though.
Yeah. You're gaming the system.
I don't necessarily
playing the game.
Playing the game.
You're playing the game.
Well, no. If you're saying you better pick this because you have an 18 strength versus something else, well, remember you just talked about encumbrance. The great thing about having a high strength wizard is they aren't being encumbered with all the equipment, so they basically become a mule if they have a high strength.
10 years of wizard school, and I'm not a mule.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it doesn't. I think that's part of the other aspect. You're not really hurting him. You're just putting it in a different aspect.
I'm just saying, if you have an 18 and you put that 18 into strength, and you're playing the wizard in AD&D where you can choose, I'm like, the milieu of that game is built around dungeon delving. Like it really is. And
I just told you why you're doing that, because you're the fighter. You're going to be overloaded with a lot of equipment and armor, and then you're expected to drag something. Whereas when your wizard does it, your wizard, because they're pretty much free, are basically your mule at that point, and that's okay.
And I would just say just hire people to carry the equipment for you. You're going to be a frontline fighter to do extra damage and tank damage. Like that's.
Here's what I think about your point. Your point is very logical, yes, but it's none of your business how another person develops their character, right? I'm playing the wizard, I want to be 18 strength, and I would simply say, the player, shut the player in you off and play the character. If you had another character playing with that guy, it's like, why wouldn't you become a warrior? Make it a character, put it through a character filter, and say, why wouldn't you become a warrior with your might? Because I wanted to learn magic. It's not my fault I was born strong as an ox.
I understand. I'm not saying what I'm saying is if I go into a table, right, where everyone is like, look, we're going to be firing on all cylinders, we're going to be playing as optimally as possible. I'm not going to be playing an 18 intelligence fighter and a 9 strength, with 9 strength. I'm not going to do it because that's not what the group wants. Because it's a team. It's a team game. It's not my game.
Hold it. You're coming down to this as remember, when you come with a player and you're rolling your stats straight down the line. I want to play a wizard. I don't want to play a fighter. If I'm fighter's boring. I got an 18 strength. Oh well, I'll just suffer through it. The other part is, your wizard tends to be throwing stuff. So at that point, then you want a high dexterity normally. But again, okay, well then what does that wizard provide to the group? He provides being the mule. That's what he provides. And that's the strength aspect. So whenever you start trying to say this as well, that's what you get. No, if people don't like what they roll, either you're going to make them re-roll or you're going to make them, again, that's fine under the 4d6 system. But if you're rolling one of the other methods, you don't get to rearrange your stats. A lot of them, you don't get to rearrange any of your stats. You just have to say, well, you know what? I have a 12 intelligence, but I have an 18 strength. Okay, fine. And it doesn't, that's the whole point. And you really don't get that much advantage, except maybe learning a couple more spells as the wizard.
This comes back to, I think this comes back to Deuce's point earlier. Pretty much everything in the game can be viewed as a resource. That 18 strength on a wizard is a party resource because your party has more carrying capacity.
I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying that if we were playing in a game that focuses on optimal play, and I would not come in and disrespect the group by playing something that runs contrary to the milieu of the table. That's disrespectful. Yeah, obviously, if the table doesn't care and they're cool with it, I'll do whatever I want. But it's like, if they ask me, look, we kind of want you to play optimally, I'll be like, okay, sure, fine. It's not a big deal to me.
Well, see, I've always heard this before.
I could see it as a fun challenge to use the 18 on a wizard, but you're not utilizing the stat to its fullest, and you will probably have less fun for it.
The
entire party will have less fun.
The reality is you're going to see that scenario very rarely. Most people
it's not
will.
happen.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's not
there
real.
is. There is one question from Straw Piglet, and I will ask the AD&Ders here. If your Strength 18 mage is double class or dual classes into fighter, does he get to roll for exceptional strength?
Once he becomes a fighter, yes.
Yes.
No.
Yeah, so
No,
Yes.
because
He could only use it when he's using his fighder stuff, though, right?
Yes.
well,
Yes.
Which is really interesting.
actually, the way I look at it is a little bit different. Now, you rolled an 18. 18 doubles, 18-0-0 only applies. Now, if you get a wish spell, then that's different. Or the other part is if you were starting at the, when you start off at young and then you become mature. When you become mature, then you get that bonus to strength, at which point, okay, now go ahead and roll.
I view it as a fighter ability. It is ability for
Yes.
those classes, and once you qualify for it, you may roll for it. It's that simple.
Well, only once you get your strength increased. That's the way I look at it.
Well,
It's
yeah,
like-
you have to have the 18.
Right. But what I'm saying is, again, this is where it comes down to where you have that mature level. When you get the mature, you get a +1 strength.
But the question is if the fighter, the 18 strength magic user, dual classed into a fighter.
I
Right?
don't know. I
Would you
understand
get-
that, but
Yeah.
you don't get to roll your stats all over again because that comes.
no,
back
but
down-
But it's not a stat. It's not a stat reroll. It is specifically an ability that fighters get where they can roll exceptional
Have.
strength.
You're
if they have an
activating a
18.
fighter
Yeah.
ability. Now you're playing as
So-
a fighter.
it's there. It's the potential to have that kind of thing where you have the percentile over 18 is always there. It just unlocks once you're a fighter. That's
So-
the
Now,
thing.
that said, that's how I would run it. Now, Omen, if I was
Yeah.
playing in your game,
Yeah.
you said this is how it is. It's like, okay, fair enough.
They're fine.
The
Yeah,
other
yeah,
point-
that-
we're
yeah.
talking AD&D. The other point is if your fire's a 17 strength and then becomes mature, when they get that 18, you allow them to roll. I thought that was
Yes.
only,
Yeah.
and I'd have to double check the rules. I thought that was only during character creation. Do you
It
get
doesn't
the
specify. It doesn't specify.
Okay.
But
So I always
that's
treat
one
it
of the
as,
things of rulings.
as an ability. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna bring up
That's-
one other point though. Is when we're talking about the strength here, is if you're a wizard.
you know what?
No. If you're the wizard, because you get such a low THACO, or your THACO moves up so slowly, having a higher strength actually benefits the wizard more than people give it credit for.
Well, especially in something like Old School Essentials, where it's a flat +3.
Yeah, Omen. What Doof and I are saying, we're not disagreeing with you that there can be benefit to having 18 strength for wizard. What we're saying is that you're not using the stat to its fullest potential.
I
That's
disagree
what we're saying.
with you on that. I disagree for exactly.
Well,
the reasons-
you can disagree all you want. You can disagree all you want, but the fact is there are things that the fighter can do with an 18 over 00 strength or with percentile strength
Just
that
18.
other classes don't
It's-
I
don't
didn't
have.
say 18
It's gonna come
double
into
zero.
play
I did
more
not say
often.
18 double zero. We're saying
Anyway.
18 and 18 strength. You're assuming
Let's-
advanced. If it's OSE, it's still a flat
How
plus
did
3.
we even get
Yeah,
here?
we're-
Yeah, how did
This
we
is
get here?
not
Let's
even
let's
what
move
we're
on.
on.
Let's
Doesn't
move
matter.
on. Let's move on. So I want to come to the point of verisimilitude. Now, an argument I see online about why people don't get into the nitty-gritty of resource management, is that they claim it takes them out of the immersion. That is something I disagree wholeheartedly. It adds to the immersion because it adds verisimilitude to the game, because now you're thinking about interacting with shopkeepers, you're interacting with the environment, you're worrying about the weather, you're worrying about traveling times, you're worrying about whether your fighter's going to encounter a rust monster. So do you get yourself a spare weapon? All these little things, you worry more about the world, which actually, to me, immerses you more in the world.
One of my favorite questions that players have embarked on their adventure and they're like 2 days away from their home base. It's like, oh, I forgot to buy rations. Can we just assume I bought food? I'm like, nope.
Nope.
I'm going to bring the other part, though, is, well, that's fine. 2 days without food, you can deal just fine with that. However, the other point that comes down to it is it actually, how do I want to put this? It makes the world smaller and more dangerous, which really adds to tension. It's very similar to in real life, like, well, what do you mean you haven't climbed Mount Everest? Just because you can fly to Nepal in the modern era, it's a whole different aspect. If all of a sudden you're like, well, I have to travel all over the world. Well, okay, how long do you want to travel time? And not only do you have to do that, is when we're talking about resource management, now you have to talk about your horses, your mules, and everything else. And suddenly a desert becomes very far. It's like, oh, okay, it's a 5-day trek. All right, you understand without water, you will die in about 3 days. Okay, now we have to do this. Well, what happens if we get the navigation roll wrong? Well, now you're screwed. It to me, that's what it does is it makes the world much more, like I said, not only just dangerous, but now it makes distances real. So to say that it pulls you out of the game, well, what it does is it doesn't allow you just go wander all over the off.
Precisely. I'm just going to say, Doof forgot to buy himself torches.
Well, you know what? It's the worst that comes down to it is, and I'm not saying that you have to do it all the time, but it's like, you know what? Yes, you would have picked that up. That's fine. How many torches did you do? Let's decrease it. Okay, I'm all right with that. Before you go in there, once you're in, you're done. You know, if it makes sense, as I'm trying to go through these things as a, well, I would have brought torches. Oh, well, okay, you know what? You're going to learn it this time. All right, this is a learning experience. How many torches did you buy? How many torches can you physically carry is the other part that comes into it.
They're heavy.
You know, it's like, all right, because too many players all too often look at it and go, and I'll say this much, as I was looking at doing some stuff in the desert for a 3-day trek. All of a sudden I was coming out that, and we're talking, we're not talking D&D stuff. Everyone in a 3-group party would have to carry 60 pounds of gear. And most of that was taken up by water. Mm-hmm. And people forget about that. It's like, okay, you're in 100-degree heat. How much water do you go through? Oh, you go through about 2 to 3 gallons a day per person. A gallon is what, about
4 liters? Yeah.
Well, it's what, about 8 pounds? I mean, when you start looking, it's like, okay, it's about 8.5 pounds per gallon.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, players are going, okay, what are you tossing? The other part is when you're going home, what treasure am I leaving behind? Which means that's less experience that you're bringing back home with you. And to me, that's the very important. Well, first edition or basic. Those are the 2 things that really come into it. And you're like, all right, now we have to get a horse. Now we have to do this. Okay, now who's going to watch your horse? And all of a sudden, your party, which if you look in old D&D, your party is not just the 4 players. It tends to be 10 or 15 retainers, all trying to carry this equipment with you, who say, you know what, we'll wait outside the dungeon while you guys go away.
And this is why charisma is a great resource for the party to have.
Mm-hmm.
You can persuade other poor sap to do it for you.
I did seek on Aaron's Discord for clarification from a grognard by the name of EOTB, and he does confirm that yes, once you gain the level in fighter, it's like if you dual class, obviously you have to gain. I imagine that you gain the full benefits, you have to equal or exceed the magic user levels. But once you gain the fighter class, you get to roll the percentile. So.
I mean, that's my interpretation, but at the same time, if a DM says no, and you have to have the 18 at first level because it's special, I'm like,
and that's
a fair
fine.
interpretation.
Yeah, that's like you have to start as a fight. Yeah.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about.
I just figured we'd.
We're here to talk about other nitty gritty things. That's a different nitty gritty thing. That's right. So I've got here. There is certainly in. What I've seen in a lot of modern gaming groups is the attitude towards things like ammo and encumbrance. They don't want to know. And in an old school game, your items are much more meaningful to the experience of the gameplay. Your items become much more precious to you. You pay a lot closer attention. In newer school gameplay, what you carry is much less relevant. I'm going to give certainly an example of the way groups think about this sort of thing. I was running Lost City I was running it in 5th edition over Roll20 a while back, and we are restarting that game. But I basically told the group, I'm not going to run 5th edition again, no matter how much you bitch and whine. If you want to play in this game, it's going to be played in OSE. And I've converted the characters to OSE. And I went through one of the player characters. This character's got 7 strength. And on this character sheet, I found suit of armor, long sword, longbow, backpack, a week's rations, a water skin, 3 quivers containing 60 arrows, 10 torches.
I'm sorry. He's carrying this. He doesn't have
50
someone to carry it for him.
No,
He's
this guy's got 7 strength. 50-foot rope. What else was the bedroll? And it's going to be a case of, okay, so you're in the Lost City. You have got yourself a place where you hole up in the Lost City. You've got to leave half of that behind. Otherwise, your character, despite the fact that your character has 16 dexterity and is only wearing leather armor and whatever, your character is now the slowest member of the party. You are crawling along if you're moving at all.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up one thing like you're talking about. Having had to carry 200 pounds of gear in Afghanistan, you suddenly start looking at all the stuff you can get rid of. And people, or you can get a horse. The other part is, if you have a mule or a horse, it's like, well, to be fair, that's a different issue in there, which bugs the hell out of me. But, if you get, it's like, look, that's why you have beasts of burden and you bring them along. It's because, look, that's pretty easy. The other point is, we're talking about that beast of burden. You still have to feed that beast of burden, which slows you down. So now you're looking at like, oh, I can travel this far. You think you can travel that far, but in fact, I think during the Middle Ages, your horse-led armies were actually slower than your infantry because it took them so long to graze their animals.
How many battles in history were won and lost due to supplies?
Almost all of them.
Every single one of them. Every single one of them.
And the other part is when you look at starvation, which is something a lot of people forget about, is once you're doing starvation and you start saying, okay, your constitution's going to go down. As your constitution goes down, that means you're more vulnerable to disease. Which all of a sudden, when you're talking about resource management, that makes your cleric, your monk, and your paladin much more valuable for either cure disease or they're immune to disease at certain levels, which is not something a lot of people remember. And I've been looking over the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Man, disease is all over the place for the characters, depending on how much you want to play it.
I like this Halakar.
It's brutal, man.
I like this Halakar, and this is I'm going to come back to this point, but I just want to say this leads into one of my points, where if you've got players thinking about their equipment and what they're carrying, not only do they have more engagement with the world, but if they are paying attention to their equipment, then they often come up with more creative ideas. And I love this idea. Because the Ranger has worked out a way around a serious problem for a character that relies on missile fire.
Oh, absolutely. The only thing is as your heroes hit, you can't replenish them. I mean, that's how do I want to put this? That's where the Conan comes in, where when you lose a load, you have to roll to see if you can regain it. And if you don't, then that load is lost. Sometimes, whether it's Free League or some of these others, which is a little bit different in resource management, as you roll low, then what happens is that it decrements the die number. So if you have a lot, you have 12, and then it goes to a D10, then it goes to a D8, which sometimes then a D6, then a D4. Sometimes when it does that, the players know that they're running low, but they don't know how much they're running low. So then that creates that other. Alien does the same thing. How much air do you have? Okay, roll so many dice. And
that's an important resource, yeah.
Yeah, but for every one you roll, you lose it. So even if you have 6 dice, theoretically, you could lose everything in one roll. So it starts creating that tension without the players actually knowing how much they have left. But different games do it. And I like the fact that they have those without doing all of the nitty-gritty, count every arrow aspect. As a DM, sometimes it's just easier. Again, if you have good, honest players, which, when I was a kid, we didn't, where the DM didn't have the trust in the players, then you start saying, well, I want to check everything. But sometimes it's just like, okay, decrement it. All right, go. So they're sometimes, but there are different ways of doing that resource management. But I think that resource management is very important. The same thing that happens with air. If you do A4, how much air do you have? And you start rolling. Players know what's going to happen, but boy, if you start suddenly your saving throws can go down each time. You get more negatives. Then players start going, okay, now what happens? So both your hit points and your saving throw kind of give you an idea of how long you can do something before you drown.
I mean, and this reminds me. I do need to. People have mentioned it a lot of times. I still need to read up the travel rules in Forbidden Lands because the way that handles resource management, in that it abstracts it, but it makes it important. I've heard so many good things about it. I still need to read it.
Well, Forbidden Lands is definitely a time resource management. Yeah. So not only are they doing that, is now you have to figure out which players are sleeping during which phase. So every day is broken up into 4 parts. And so most players may only be traveling 6 to 12 hours a day. 6 hours would probably be the most reasonable, which means they're not going nearly as fast as you think that they would. And then if you march fast, you can do it. But boy, when you start getting sleep and then you get cold and you're hungry, you're kind of screwed.
It's Doof's bedtime, so see you, Doof.
Cheers, bye, Doof. It's interesting though, like that something else that's been lost, because we don't have a resource management culture anymore, or at least in the later editions of the game we don't. Is a creative use for those resources. Like we just don't do that anymore. Like most would think, oh, we need food to eat. Well, you can use food as bait.
Yeah. I said paying attention to your resources and paying attention to your equipment. And of course, equipment is a lot of what people think of in terms of resources.
Rope isn't just for climbing. Like an acrobat can use a rope to get across the ravine instead of using a board or a ladder. Like the most common one, the biggest one that almost every party does is oil. Oil is not just a thing for a light source. It's a thing that allows. It's not just that. It's also something that stops the advance of the enemy. If you put like 2 or 3 squares full of oil, that enemy isn't going to cross through 3 squares of fire.
It's how my party managed to complete U3, the final enemy. They remembered that oil floats on top of water, and they got to the bit where in the lair it's no longer submerged, and they covered the top of the water in oil and just smeared the whole area with oil and just lit it. So the Sawajin, to get to them now, had to get through this constantly being refueled, thick, choking wall.
While they're also getting shot at or poked at with spears. Yes. Yeah, it's not like I was even talking to someone at work that like unrealistic things you see in movies is the guy walks away from an explosion or jumps into a pool after an explosion. If any of that fire is like it's an oil fire and that fire gets on top of the water, that fire isn't going to go out in any time soon.
No. But there are ways of dealing with it. If you actually look at how the Navy does it, is they recommend trying to push it off so you can get at least come up and take a breath and go back under. But the other part is you're all talking about fire. Let's not forget you can put that on ladders and stuff like that where they cannot physically climb to get you.
Oh yeah. I was just about grease. The grease spell. Just use oil and just go. Yeah, I cast the oil spell and just let it. But what's even more annoying about the grease spell in 5th edition? The way it's worded, it can only target the ground. You can't target like ladders or ceilings or walls. You can only target the ground.
Well, 5e has 5e. I don't like 5e because they don't allow you the
creativity.
There's a lot of specificity. Anyway, Elfbait has joined us. Hello, Elfbait. How are you doing?
Hey, Elfbait.
How are you?
Just listening to the conversation. I mean, you definitely don't want to be overly specific because in real life, lamp oil burning on the floor is something you can just kind of walk over. I've had to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea when you're doing the game, you're creating a patch that's big enough to accommodate, right?
Oh no! I mean, the flames just don't burn that high when they're open. So,
right.
I mean, if you've got adventuring boots or armor on, you can just like bloop, bloop, bloop your way across it. So
Well, when they normally talk about it, and there's different.
it's not like you're slinging crude around the dungeon,
Right.
Yeah, but there's also a double-edged sword of that. If you throw too much, like say lamp oil or fire in a dungeon, you could choke to death.
Yes.
If you're not careful. Like I literally remember we got trapped in a room, and I think it was me. It was probably me who's going to go. I'm going to just throw oil at this big mass that was blocking the door, and it's like, yeah, I wouldn't do that if I were you, because you can't get out, and you don't have a whole lot of oxygen in that room. Like, oh.
Well, I mean, don't they do that in the wilderness? Was it the Wilderness Adventure, or the Dungeoneers guy that talked about air, which was something that was not mentioned a lot of times before?
It was probably Wilderness. It was probably Wilderness Exploration 1E. Probably.
No, it's the Dungeoneer Survival Guide because they're talking about caverns and caves.
Yeah. I couldn't remember which one it was in, but that was important. And, how long can this space survive for one person? Blah blah blah. It's. But absolutely,
they dedicated a lot of time in that book to trying to make wilderness much more realistic, like everything else. Like they're talking about 3 dimensions. Like sometimes the door, the offshoots from the cave are not like just left, right. Sometimes they're up or down, or there's a V in the hallway and it's like up in the air. But yeah, resource management is something that I think is fun to add to the game, but it can also be overplayed.
And it depends on what type of game you're trying to look for. But the part of it is I want to, and this is what always gets me about any kind of distance. Oh, you're in an unexplored area, but we're not going to make it really hard to get there. That kind of bug. Whereas if you look at like the G1, 2, and 3 series, boy, if the players actually have to go to that hex, that is an adventure all unto itself. When you start going to the mountains and things, that's and they better be prepared for all of that. It's like, okay, what are we going to do? And anyone that's actually read, which I always enjoy, is go look at the Polar Explorers and what they had to do to get to the South Pole and back, or the North Pole and back, and how many of them died in the attempt from starvation or other stuff. Go ahead. Sorry.
But there was a. Oh, go ahead. Good.
No, I was going to move on to another point, but if you guys, yeah.
No, it's all right. You go ahead. I can bring it up later.
I was going to come to some comments that have been. I wanted to. So, I'm not very good at focusing on what chat say while we're chatting away. So I do occasionally, sporadically go through clicking the star to try and remind me. And
yeah, I don't. I'm watching the chat at the moment as well. So if there's anything useful, I can let you know.
I mean, Elfbait, I didn't know. Have I made you a chat mod? Is that still on?
I don't believe so.
I thought I'd made a couple of people chat mods.
I do not have the ability to star anything. So.
Oh, fair enough.
Well, you know what? I'm going to laugh at Straw Piglet. Do you let characters eat their oil? Well, like everything else, it depends on the type of oil.
Yeah. Olive oil. They can use it for cooking.
Well, there's a lot of.
Or rubbing that kink out of the paladin's shoulder after a particularly long fight. Just get in there real good.
Or leaning into the kink on the character you rolled on the harlot table.
Well, if you ever save that cleric from Beckme,
Alina? Oh no, it's Alicia.
Alina.
It's Alina. That's it. Right.
One game we played in, oil came in very, very useful. One guy was playing the part of he was a halfling thief, and he was a pretty nasty halfling thief. A bit of a selfish so-and-so.
A Kender.
No, he was just halfling. But he had this sort of alter ego as a simple merchant trader, and he always took his donkey with him, and he'd given his donkey a name. I can't remember the donkey's name, unfortunately, but the donkey became part of the party, and we had to get through this very small passageway, and there was a very, very memorable scene where we were smearing this donkey in various concoctions of oil and fat and lard, whatever we get our hands on,
slip it through,
to try and squeeze this donkey down this passageway. It was about 4 foot wide.
I was literally about to bring up the fact that you could theoretically use oil to get out of grips. Like if an enemy's grappled you You can
Yeah.
throw oil on yourself and you just go boop.
But you're not allowed to wear armor for that. In my case, it's like, okay, you gotta be effectively naked, loincloths only.
Fair enough. Okay, that's fair enough. But I'm no like I see Lord Fullmine bring up iron spikes for monsters, and I realized language like you just brought up with charisma, and it just got me thinking about languages and charisma modifiers for convincing intelligent monsters to join you. If you can speak to monsters like orcs or giants or drow or whatever, if you can talk to them, that's a resource.
Of course it
Now,
is.
it's contingent on the fact that you can convince them, but still, it's still a potential resource.
The thing is, though,
Well,
it doesn't run out like tangible resources. It doesn't
But-
really.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
a party resource.
It's
But
way
this
more
comes back
abstract than most, you know.
No. But this is where it comes back to Mage's Musings talking about humans have the least, or they don't immediately cause aggravation, or what is it?
They have a neutral response in first
Yeah.
ed.
Yeah.
They have a neutral racial modifier.
Yep.
I mean, they also have
that's a
more
huge
potential. I think they also get like they're the only ones who get to choose their languages and get more languages from high intelligence than other races. Like elves and dwarves don't get to add extra languages; they just get what they start with. I think
They do if your intellect is really high, like 16s.
17 to 18.
Oh, right. Okay, fair enough. I thought it was just they don't get it at all. Okay.
No. You get the basic, but didn't you won't? Oh, but then that gets subtracted from your total known languages, and so if you get 9 languages, then you have to subtract those first ones off, and then you can learn the others from there. Yeah.
Okay, right. So if you would get 9 and you start with 6, you just get to choose 3 more. Okay, gotcha.
3 more, yeah.
Cool. Fair enough.
So let's come to these starred comments as I'm just using my fridge to chill a drink.
Nice.
Oh, I'm gonna mention one other thing. We're talking about resources. We also have to look at, if you're going to talk about skills, the ability to forage. I don't know if any of you remember the old. I know Eli probably does, but I'm not sure if anyone else does. The rules for different healing plants in the Dragon magazines.
Oh yeah, there were a couple articles on that, and even I believe the DMG originally had a list of herbs.
But it didn't give any rules for them. It just kind of said, "Hey, this is used against poison or something." Yeah, but you're right. But I'm saying, but they were more specific.
Oh yeah,
and that makes a big difference of where you are, and does your player have that wilderness survival herbalism skill?
There's a wonderful herbs table in MERP, and I would love to see that sort of thing ported into D&D. Where all the herbs are given a difficulty of finding, an environment they can be found in, and a climate they can be found in. So you might have cool, temperate, shoreline,
marshy,
easy to find. And we had a key moment in the game at the weekend, which has actually prompted something for the future. That we have a Dunedain bard in the party. Of course, Dunedain are the high men. They've got some distant elven blood, that sort of royalty about them, and we'd never made anything about that of the character. And I hope Duralumin isn't watching at the moment.
Straw Piglet is showing his true.
No, I haven't seen anyone from that particular game in chat, which is, and they were trying to help this friendly ranger who had been poisoned by the angry Woses. We're using a poison that the Woses derive from frogs called grey flyers. I had the party meet some of these frogs, little tiny things about that big, but you don't. They're like the poison arrow tree frog type creatures. You do not want to make contact with them. And he was in a really bad way. So they went out hunting, and they were in the right climate to find Athelas, which is the herb that Aragorn uses.
King's foil, yeah.
Yeah, King's foil,
yeah.
yes. And on his foraging check, he rolled near maximum. The dice exploded, and he rolled very high again. He rolled over 200 on percentile dice, on exploding dice, which means he found Athalas. He succeeded on the check. It was in the right environment, the right weather, and all that sort of thing. And then it came down to his own royalty level as to how much effect it would have, something we hadn't determined yet. So I rolled dice just to randomly to see quite how pure his blood is, and then hinted at the result from that by the fact that the Athalas had some effect. And that, to me, really, it added to the world, and it fitted with the world, and it added to the game, and it's got the players thinking about future character development as a result, because that character's just learned something about himself. He can use Athalas, albeit to a lesser degree, but it means something, and that comes from resources in the world.
The Wilderness Survival Guide for AD&D has not specific to the plant type, but it does have a metric for foraging, and then you have a base chance of finding it based on climate and season and all that. And then when you find what you find, there's a chance that it might be simply have no nutritional value, or it might be actually toxic. And so you got to make all those rolls, which can be a lot of fun.
Sorry.
Well, and this is something that Forbidden Lands does a lot of, because you can get forward, but then you have to have cooking in certain cases to turn what you found into something edible.
Edible, yeah.
You know, and I like Forbidden Lands for that, but that's one of those that is, when you talk about resource management, that is probably one of the more intense things, where that's one of the few games where your fighting capability does not is equivalent to cooking. Your cooking is not a throwaway talent or anything else out there. It's like, this is a core critical skill that you want someone in the party to have. I want someone to have forage. I want someone with fishing. I want someone that can do that. I mean,
yeah.
You know,
if you're running a really good, like a really strong lean into the survival resource management, cooking can also be not just a matter of like being able to sustain yourself. It can be a morale boosting thing too, as well.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, we're out here in the wilderness. It sucks. It's been raining for 3 days, but man, that venison and wild potato, wild onion hash that you cooked up for us, under that overhanging rock, just in the spot.
And also, you can use it combined with charisma to improve your standing in with NPCs.
Exactly. Let me make you my famous omelet.
Yeah. I mean, we did mention earlier in the stream about how character ability stats can be seen as a resource in the party, though it's not a finite resource, obviously. But it depends how you use them. Right.
But yeah, to answer Straw Piglet's question, yes, it is. But I'd love to see you try to kill one. You better bring a lot of fire, my friend.
So, okay, some of the starred comments anyway. We did mention time as a resource, and I think this is it's slightly off the topic, but I think this is a fair point. There's a lot of things that time as a resource has been severely devalued in the game, in my opinion.
I'm going to bring up the other part is to drop a weapon is nothing, and pulling out a weapon usually doesn't take too much. The problem is like, well, what happened to my weapon after that? Oh, it broke. That's one thing I do wish that.
Or you had to run and didn't get to reclaim it, or
that's happened to my players even in 5e, because I've house ruled it that changing weapons the right way is an action, but if you want to drop a weapon and pull another one, you can. And there's been times where they've had to flee, left weapons behind, or there have been times where they've dropped their weapon into something that didn't make it easy to recover. Slop, water, rocky terrain where it slid down the shale.
Well, we did that in Call of Cthulhu, and I dropped my pistol because, it's not really that good to try reloading in the middle of hand-to-hand combat. And then we ran.
So
I didn't get my pistol back. And I know that John remembers that. When we were fighting the, I guess was the second stage. I can't remember if it was the first or second stage, but I was like, great. I don't have a weapon for most of the game. That was critical for that.
Well, another thing too is especially when you're talking about more modern games. Okay, you're gonna drop your pistol. What kind of a gun is that? Did it just go off?
Well, it was the one shot. Well, only if it's a P365. When you drop the gun, should it actually go off? But
I think pistol's an odd word for it, given that these were more sort of musket type things. These were gunpowder based weapons.
Well, yeah, but I think it actually said flintlock pistol. It said flintlock pistol. I think is what it actually said for us.
Yes, it was a flintlock pistol. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
So here's a fun little scenario. Somebody did a video last week on how broken the healing proficiency is in 5th edition, and like an idiot, I commented and invited all sorts of scorn. Because the guy was talking, the video was talking about
arguments on the internet. Next thing you'll tell me that there are harlots here.
Yes.
Utter lies, sir. Utter lies.
Anyway, so the point was, and something I said that I mentioned that even though it's technically not in the rules, I rule that using the healing proficiency to use your healing kit and bind somebody's wounds cannot be done in combat. It has to be done out of combat. And then, of course, that's when the argument started. Well, no, it says it's an action, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, it's a 6-second action. You are not going to stabilize a critically injured person while in melee in 6 seconds. And everybody's arguing, well, I am an EMT. I am trained for combat situations, so I could totally do it. I'm like, fucking bullshit.
Well,
the thing is, too, about it is like you could, okay, yes, you're an EMT. You're trained to do this with modern technology.
Yeah.
And it's still hard to do. But also, fundamentally, the biggest problem where their argument should have just stopped is like you said, you ruled it in your game. So they can fuck off with anything else when it comes to that.
But here's the thing, and it's like, and they bring up the point that battlefield medics do it. I'm like, yes, battlefield medics do it, but I'm talking about melee combat where there's a guy with a sword trying to kill you or your patient in a 6-second span. You're telling me you can open up your healing kit, administer aid, and get this person moving in 6 seconds while somebody is swinging a sword and trying to kill you.
Yeah, that's a big difference because modern combat, you get shot from umpty billion feet away. Most cases. I guarantee you, in World War I, when the trenches got overrun, there was no medic going, "I've got 6 seconds."
Yeah.
Well, here's the other point. It's fine that you can do it in combat, but guess what? It takes so many rounds to effectively do that. That's the problem of the time. It's like, okay, if you drag him back, you can stabilize him, but you can't do any other actions during that period. I don't, and I agree with you. It's one of these things like, they act like everything is equivalent instead of saying, okay, outside of combat, you have effectively an unlimited time or however long it takes a couple of minutes. But in the other time, it's like, well, look, okay, guess what? It's going to roll on how many minutes it's going to take you to stabilize this person. Well, what? Yes, that's what you need to do. And combat can go around you. And if it's a long combat, which is sometimes the problem that you have, okay, that's what it's going to take. But that's the way I look at it. It shouldn't just take one segment effectively to do everything. Which is actually where I like the old D&D with 1 round was 1 minute.
1 minute, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That made a bit of sense.
It take a little bit more time. Yeah.
In the game that I run with the question Grumpy Old Stan puts up, the way I handle the 6-second drawing out a weapon or changing stuff, I just say, look, at the start of the round, because I do missile, movement, melee, magic, and say, what's your intent? Are you going to use missile or melee? And they say, that's what you draw out at the start of the round. And that's what you're stuck with. If you're going melee, you're going into the melee.
That's standard declarative actions. Yeah.
Melee.
Yeah. But
melee.
Melee.
You're not American. Melee. You're not American.
I don't care.
Melee.
Melee. I will say melee just to spite you. Melee. So back to what I was saying is that God, I lost my fucking train of thought. Thanks for that. Geek.
Hey, you don't need to curse him out just because you're on his stream. He can just drop you and you can come back. No, I'm just.
I mean, if he wants to drop me, he's well within his right to do so. But I'm just a dickhead.
And then
so
he was
you know.
dropped. No.
No.
It would be ironic if my internet crashed at this very moment. That would have been hilarious.
May my date lead to LA.
Well, no. I do have to laugh when people are talking about this. Is you can't stabilize in 6 seconds. I'm going to tell you this much, having gone through that class. You either stuff it full of gauze or you put a tourniquet on it, and only after combat do you actually evaluate what the real wound is. And the first thing, which for anyone that plays my own combat, is the first thing they say is, "Can you shoot?" That's what you ask someone that's been wounded. And if they answer yes, then the answer is you keep shooting.
Yep.
If you're in a war zone, yeah.
No, I mean that's what we were taught. Yeah, that's exactly what you're taught. And only after that is like, okay, if the person says I can't, then you start saying, okay, it's going over. But if he's been shot anywhere, they're like, slap a tourniquet on to any external extremity for the limbs, and then otherwise you just stuff it full of gauze, and you can always take a tourniquet off. But they're just like, just stop the wound immediately, stop it from bleeding, and just go. and tourniquets don't take that long, but you always use the other guy's tourniquet, not your own. So yeah, that's some of the things.
Anyway, right. Accidentally. Oh, I've just accidentally unstarred something I was going to come back to. I don't know which comment it was. Sorry to whoever's comment that was. Going to go back now to Slan's comment here. If you keep dropping equipment, you end up with some of it damaged or trampled on. I don't do that, but the enemy might pick it up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, air as a resource. Yes, we touched on that. Hello, K5K. Nice to see you here.
Poison gas is not your friend.
Absolutely. Hidden Shrine of Tomoa-chan.
Yep.
You learn the value of fresh air. But that does take me on to a point where I want to come on. A few people have mentioned certain adventures. I remember the bit. The one I accidentally took the star off and lost was Slan mentioning a point in module A4 where there's a bridge made out of dead husks of giant ants. So the ants themselves have used a resource to cross this chasm. Air, module U3, the final enemy, your air supply is vital in that.
I mean, I'm running through Stonehell, and even Stonehell points out that in lower levels of the dungeon, they have these structures that cleanse the air, right? So like that would get you thinking, yeah, if you go deep enough into the earth in a dungeon, like if you're like 10 levels down underground, that's several hundred feet into the ground. How fresh is that air gonna be? When you're that
fresh
far
as my backside after I've eaten cheese.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you're gonna have to maybe get a magic item that lets you breathe stagnant air so you don't choke to death. Because I don't know if you've noticed this. Going into a room with like high carbon dioxide levels in it, it's not pleasant. It tends to put a damper on things,
Yeah, you would struggle. And yes, it devalues adventures like the Lost City, which are based. The whole point of that adventure is you have run out of food and water. You are going into that pyramid to get food and water. Your characters need food and water to have a chance of surviving. But hello, Lost Adventurer. I don't think I've seen you on my streams before. Welcome to the stream. And hello, Iman, who plays in our Saturday games. Nice to see you popping by as well. So, hello, chaps.
So I found myself digging into Mage's healing kit thing while you guys were chatting. One thing you could potentially get them on is the fact that if they are currently fighting and wielding other equipment, it would take them at least an action to be able to switch from holding their weapons to
and the shield
to being able to ready their kit, because it says as an action you can use the such and such from your kit, but if you look at the action mechanics, using an object is an action, so you have to be able to change. So,
and is it buried in your backpack?
Well, I mean, even if it's on your belt, the fact of the matter is like, we're back to, are you dropping it or are you taking the action to put it away? And, so.
But one thing K5K has said here attracted my attention. I like this as a DM. I love to put bits and bobs in an adventure where the players have to consider what equipment they've got, what equipment they've found, whether puzzles in the adventure are related to things they'll find, or there was a nice bit in my most recent game. Were you there in that one, Mage, when you found a load of recipes, and in order to remove the curse from the 3 French hens,
You need to make
you had to
cordon
read
bleu.
Madame Cordon Bleu, Madame Fricassee, and Madame Chasseur.
Yeah,
Yes,
I was there for that.
there were cauldrons underneath the various chickens, and the chickens were these. You didn't know at the time. The only hint was that the chickens were going luck, 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 luck. I was hoping someone would pick up on the fact that they were trying to speak French, and they weren't. Yeah, but in order to get them freed, you had to make the recipes in the relevant cauldrons underneath. And General Nutt had said that his character had studied the recipe books beforehand and got all the ingredients in town for those recipes. And then when he went into the dungeon, he completely forgot to make them. And I'd actually placed all of the ingredients at various points around the dungeon. They encountered the supply of milk was this huge cow's udder coming from a one-room ceiling. The supply of cheese, the party had to defeat a gelatinous cheese. But that would supply cheese. It's a silly dungeon. It's a bit of a fun house in places, but that was the whole point. There was just to pay attention to the environments and work out the puzzle. But they could have completely got around it, this alternative uses thing or whatever, by simply getting the ingredients from outside and taking the ingredients in and thinking about what they take into the dungeon. And there you go. That solved it.
I just think, if you're doing, if equipment matters and resource management is a thing, it's also it's one of the best ways to get your players to stop doing is it on my character sheet, skill monkey stuff, or also to make them like think creatively in situations, because they have things to think creatively. Back to the oil comment, I remember a halfling getting greased up to try and squeeze him through a small hole in a dungeon once. Because the thing is, can the halfling fit through it? No. Well, what if we apply our oil to him and start pushing him through? And the GM, I guess, let him do it. But
keep that torch away from me. Keep that torch away.
The presence of those things on your sheet is a positive instance of character sheet interaction, because you do start thinking about, I don't know how many times my players, even in my 5e game, because most of them are old school players, are looking at their sheet like, what do I got? I've got a tiny little hammer. Can I use this little hammer? And so
I see chat have dived straight into the whole healing thing.
But I mean,
kept them occupied, Mage.
well, you don't have to talk about resource management. I know Elfie talked about this, about magical healing. Well, then that also gives you into the distances. How far is it to said healer if you're poisoned? How far is it to said, it's like for disease. Well, do we lop off the limb now, or do we drag him for 7 days to try saving it?
Or do we lop off the limb, cauterize it, and get him to the next town where they can cast restoration and restore the limb?
Well, no. But again, that comes down to cash also, which is, how much is it? It's like, the old joke. Well, I sat on a snake, on a rattlesnake, and it bit me. And they're like, well, you're gonna have to suck out the poison. Like, well, it looks like you're gonna die.
Well, yeah, and there's, I mean, somebody had mentioned, fantasy quick clot. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
if, in a fantasy setting, I could absolutely see there being the equivalent of that, some sort of alchemical powder or even a fantasy herb, because we were
Yeah.
just talking
I'm gonna
about
head off,
that.
gents. Bye.
Oh,
All right, see you
later,
later.
All right, Tom.
Okay.
Bye bye.
But I mean, but that's the but the healing cells, stuff like this. This is all great, but if you're going to go over, and I'm going to mention more of a Warhammer Fantasy style, just because that's it's not quite as high fantasy as a lot of D&D is. All right, I'm going to go to the witch. All right, now she has to go get all these herbal compounds to stop your friend's bleeding, or to help. And there's a lot of aspects for that. It's like, okay, you're starting to watch the the gangrene go up. Well, do you cut off the finger, or do you want to try saving it? But if they fail, then they're going to cut off the hand. You're
Yeah,
like, well, how are we going to do this?
That goes back to that whole resource management breeds adventure.
Yes.
Because there's, like you just mentioned, the witch, right? I know even in my 5e campaign, the players needed something. The only resource available to them with the magic that they needed was a hag. And so they had to go to the hag, which means they had to make a deal with the hag and do something the hag wanted them to get what they needed. So, I mean, that even if you have healing magic in your world, again, you're talking about like travel distances and stuff like that. But the existence of those resources creates the discussion and the argument over how to approach that. Do we use that one healing potion we have, or do we try and tough it out and get to some mundane healing?
Have we lost DK while I was distracted?
Yeah,
he departed. Yes, he had to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, DK. All right, I'm sorry. You were saying, Elfmate. Sorry.
Oh no, I was done.
You were done. Okay. Are we done with healing resources now? Are we done with healing with?
Yes, you may proceed.
I'm going to. We're talking about some of these things about resources. What about when you start going towards domain level style play? I don't know if when you start getting a castle. And then you start getting
then your resources are different. It's like, what's my tax revenue? How much food does the village have?
Well, but I mean,
do I have a daughter of marrying age?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's more. What is that? A Pendragon or something like some of those, or RuneQuest?
It came up in our games when we got to domain play back in the day, but
the other part is that you get the how many weapons. What's your armor? Am I going to start securing iron ore in a certain area? Those are things that I was referring to. Hey, Bear.
Somebody poked the bear.
No, the bear's been watching for about an hour.
Well, good. I had to go take a real quick break here, and I'll let the bear take my place for a moment.
Aw, I could never take your place, sir. You're one of a kind.
He's an elf. You're a bear.
Exactly. It's a Baldur's 3 cutscene.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
you're muted, Elf.
What I love is Eli has. I'm sorry. I thought that you were actually talking to someone at work, Eli. No. So you did. I was like, maybe you should have cut the video there.
No. I'll be back.
We're gonna watch his life play out in real time with a mute.
Yeah, exactly.
Does he do the robot for his customers?
He's doing a dance off.
So, Bear, how are you on the topic of resource management?
Well, I fell in love with the ammo die, but only for arrows, because Cyberpunk taught me to hate bullet tracking. Like, ammo tracking drove me nuts because it was such a bookkeeping thing. But overall, I run a more cinematic style game than, say, you guys might. So the only time you're going to run out of something is when it's going to be dramatically appropriate, right? And then that's going to be all right, you're reaching your pack for that? Cool, let's make a saving throw for that to see if it survived the fall.
Does it depend on the system you're running, though? Because I know you like your superheroes games.
Superheroes is different. Superheroes are very different. You can't, it's hard to use superheroes, RPG style, as a baseline for any other type of game. It's its own world, it's its own thing, it's its own tropes. And you can't have a sandbox superhero game. we just wander around the city. I mean, yeah, you're on patrol, but there's got to be a story. Otherwise, we just wander around until something happens. What a bunch of useless superheroes.
Hey, Bear, stop
Yeah.
knocking the tick, okay? No,
No, the Tick is a love letter to superheroes and its absurdity.
I know, but that was my whole point. Is hey, we're it's time to go on patrol.
Look west, little wooden boy.
Gravity is a harsh mistress.
You could argue that in a sense, 5th edition has attempted to bring in some superhero traits into D&D.
I'm going to bring this much: is 5th edition is really Harry Potter. When you look at what they have, it's not a lot of resource management, and that's the group that's really, when you're looking at young adults, that's the one it's going for. Whereas we grew up in the old style of Conan the Barbarian and stuff like this, and the old war gamers. So it's a different mentality. Just
very much so. Very much so. I mean, I like tracking resources. I like feeling in the world, whether I'm a DM or a player. And I like feeling in the world as much as I like feeling in the character. I find them both equally important. I don't want either of them to be diminished by the rules or the play style or the play style at the table, because as a player, I like tracking all of it. And as a DM, it depends on the game I'm trying to run. But if I'm running something like MERP or AD&D or OSE, I'm quite happy tracking things away. I don't track things as much if I'm running Call of Cthulhu, because it's a different feel of game. What matters more is trying to keep some suspense there, trying to keep the whole.
I'm going to bring one other thing.
The whole game moving.
I'm going to bring the other part with Call of Cthulhu is we're usually close enough that you can get whatever basic resources you need.
It is assumed. It is assumed in the game system, yeah.
In most cases, I know that if you're going to go, like if we can go to Antarctica or something, that's a whole different aspect. But if you're in the city, you don't really have to track a lot of resources. Mostly you're tracking money. You're not tracking, did you eat today? Did you sleep enough? The assumption
money can be exchanged for goods and services. Therefore, it is a resource.
Yeah. But I mean, like Bear, you're running against the Dark Master right now, right?
Yes.
So how are you doing tracking resources in there? You're just doing the critical whenever it's a dramatic effect?
Well, yeah, as I previously stated, I run a cinematic style game where it's only going to matter when you need it. And then if there's a reason why it might not be there, we'll do some sort of roll to see if it is or isn't. Oh, sorry, when you fell down the mine shaft, all that shit fell out of your bag. And one of the things you didn't get was, that one potion or that one ring or that one key or whatever.
Does that clash though a little with the grittiness of the combat in that game?
Not at all. How would it clash? What would be the clash?
I mean,
other than, London Calling.
I just things like breaking swords, for example. You've got fumbles in there, which can result in broken weapons.
Sure.
And weapons are a resource.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if you get a fighter with a broken weapon?
Well, if he doesn't have a backup weapon, shit out of luck. Learn to use that hilt like Aragorn.
But then his weapons are a resource. So in that sense, they're having to track resources.
Well, look, you can split the hair as much as you like.
Yes, I am. Yes.
And I'm a big fan of splitting hairs.
I'm just trying to be awkward. That's all.
No, absolutely. You're British. You guys can't help but be awkward. But the point is that things like that are major events. If a weapon breaks or something that's going to fuel story, that's going to fuel event, that's going to fuel a moment. Whether or not they have enough torches is not so exciting, unless if those lights go out, the chuds come and we're screwed. Now, how many torches you have is really going to matter a lot.
So
it's a case of track it when it matters.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's how a lot of people want to do. I'm going to mention one other thing, though. Is you were talking about weapons right there. Let's not forget that there are different weapons for different opponents as a resource management, because I know that first edition has their specialty, but a lot of them, even in 5th edition, have slashed, piercing, and bludgeoning. And I know in the first edition, certain times, certain creatures were immune to certain ones, or they only
It's
took like 1 point of
woefully
damage.
underused, though. That it's there and it's good that it's there. But if you look at the monsters in 5th edition, it is woefully underused. It really should be utilized a lot more. And then it would add more importance to what weapon the characters have got.
Well, in D&D, the what is it? It's you wanted a bashing weapon against skeletons. Otherwise, the rest of them do like 1 damage, or they immune to piercing. It's be like son of a, and that makes skeletons a lot harder if all of a sudden you're going, well, but my 2-handed sword does a lot more damage. Yes, but not in this case. Like, oh man.
Yeah, it's your 2-handed sword, but we're also in a 5x5 corridor. Good luck swinging that thing around. You're stabbing with it at best. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, exactly. And you could half-hand it, and that's fine. That's looking at stuff.
Yeah.
But
You'll actually watch people use 2-handers. They fight a lot more like pole arms, anyways,
Yes,
except
they
for
do.
the open field swinging bit.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The hand and a half when you're starting to do it. But no, I mean, those are things that, when we talk about weapons in there, sometimes that's what players forget is you don't just carry one style of weapon. You're like, well, I've got to do this. Oh, and this one.
The
and
golf
this one.
bag full of weapons.
Yeah, but at some point you got to talk about, like, is there encumbrance happening here? Because literally,
That's part of resource management.
Well, it's part of resource management.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't be a Swiss Army knife, walking through that
Everybody
dungeon.
still tries.
Everybody
Oh
tries.
yeah, of course they do.
Skeletons, hand me my my lucerne hammer.
Well, what are you talking
Wait,
to,
wait,
Hanman?
wait.
Shut up! I'm casting a spell. Blah, 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 blah.
Hold on. Which one is the? And I can't remember. It's the one that turns into different weapons. It's the the rod of might, or it's the.
We're
Rod of Lordly
fighting
Might.
goblins. Give me that
Yeah.
longsword. That's +3 versus goblins. Demons are here. Okay, the Demon Slayer sword.
No. I mean the one where you press different buttons.
Yeah.
I would remind you that we got a bag of holding in the last adventure, so I have put all my things in the bag of holding.
But I would like to remind you that you never identified it, and it was actually a bag of devouring.
Devouring.
Ha-ha!
Oh no! Wait, you put your sword of sharpness in the bag of holding, and it nicked the inside, and it's now all in natural space.
No, my species has fairy blood, and we automatically identify magic items by sight. Therefore, it would have known.
I know people love to bag on 5th edition, no pun intended here, but pun completely intended. I will say that I love the fact that they created the Bagman, which is a entity that will crawl out of your bag of holding, the Grudge style, and kill you in your sleep.
Me gusta, me gusta.
And it's random. Like it may happen, it may never happen. Because he's in there moving around between the bags.
So I'm a rare bird that is a fan of those crappy D&D movies that were made in the 2000s. Like, I like them for the most part because they're just cheesy fun. They're like 80s films. And one of the things I loved is in the third one, the excellent use of a bag of holding to get rid of the party member he murdered and didn't want anyone else to wake up and know was murdered, so they think the guy ran off in the night. It's like, that was clever. I'm like, I like that stuff in a body in a bag of holding and then thrown in a lake. Awesome. Well done. Good idea.
Well, see, part of the problem I have with that is like,
So there's resource management. How do you deal with corpses? Anyway.
You animate them and use them to carry your golf bag full of magic swords.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Or you do what the one party that my friends did when I was a kid, but I'll let Omanal finish his spiel first.
No, I was just going to let Mage's Musings talk about his Night Below characters where they use the resource management of all the bodies as zombified.
He zombifies them. Yeah.
But the other point I think that it is when you make things too common, you can throw away that bag of holding without second thought. If it all of a sudden comes down to you very rarely get magical items, and that's one of the things I hated about some of the earlier editions. It's like, I got a +1 sword. Just throw that into the room with with the other 45 +1 swords until I get
to the point where there's a Dragon magazine comic that shows a conveyor belt stamping +1 sword on it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, before Alpe tells us the story of his youth, let me counter that with one thing, Omanal. What's rarer, your bag of holding or your life?
No. I'm not disagreeing.
In this situation,
Depends
throwing
on
away
how high
bag of
how
holding-
high a level the cleric in the party is.
No. Jesus, you guys are bitching about the cheesiness of throwing multiple magic items, but
No.
do I have a cleric who can
I'm just
revivify
saying,
me?
if you make things go in there, they may actually worry less about the party member that disappears and more about why did the bag of holding disappear. Is my point. Whereas
Well, it
if
was
they're
his
just
bag of holding, and I don't think the rest of the party knew he had it, so it worked out fine.
well, yeah.
I'm trying to think of the clever use of magic items. So my party were playing I Won, Dwellers of the Forbidden City, and there's an aboleth in that. And one of the party members had a portable hole, and somebody got hit by the aboleth, and your skin goes all clear and membranous. And they said, okay, can we fill the portable hole with water and then float this party member in it so that just their head is poking out of the portable hole? And then take him back to town and try and get him sorted out. So on the journey back, the portable hole was in the bottom of the wagon. And there was this black hole in the bottom of the wagon with a character's head just occasionally bobbing out of it. That's as he was trying to stay wet.
That is creative use of magic items.
Yeah,
it is.
I'm not against that. Sometimes if you want to have that ridiculous aspect to games, I think that's a lot of fun.
We used the window frame that comes in the robe of useful items or whatever it is, back in D&D to get through the magic armor of a Titan we were fighting. The wizard's pulls it out of the robe and slaps it on his chest and creates the window and opens it up, so then the ranger with the arrow of slaying can shoot and bypass his armor. So.
Oh, okay.
Just putting a window in the armor.
Yeah, put the window in the armor and then open the window.
Right.
In his breastplate. So it's a Titan. He's got plenty of real estate there.
Yeah.
But creative use of course we had to ask the DM, it says you can make a window appear in a surface. Would his breastplate count as a surface? And he's like, yes. We're like, all right, cool. So now get me up there with your wings of flying so I can use the rope.
See, the problem for me is when I played D&D and when I've run D&D, I'm considered skimpy on magic items because that's how I came up. If we found a +1 sword, there was a history to it, and it was an event, and it was like, woo. And then there was the one DM who, after 5 sessions, we found rope. It wasn't magical, but we did the rope dance because we found something useful, and we were so happy about that. So when I hear people talk about wings of flying and portable holes, I'm just like, I never played that D&D.
Yeah, but they've been there since the beginning, almost. The AD&D.
Well, I'm not doubting their existence. I'm just saying I've never played at that level of D&D.
Played a lot more in that space when I was younger, though. I mean, my older games are a little bit more magic scarce. So.
Well, and to be fair on this, is I ran. My friend did it, and he played 4 or 5 characters all together, so we'd have a full party. And they got up to 40th level, and at that point, I was like, oh, I will never allow this to happen again. And so when Dark Sun came along, I'm like, yes, now you're just happy to get metal armor. So that was the
Mark Hoffman makes a point here. Did Gygax nick the idea of the portable hole from Bugs Bunny?
I went from everywhere else. Why not?
Why not? Yeah, it's why. Well, you know what though is we all say Gygax nixed it, but probably one of his players mentioned it's oh, let me create something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in that early D&D. Such and such player had an idea and asked if he could make it or if he could find it in the game somewhere, and ta-da! Yeah,
we have somebody new.
Is this? Yeah, let's be careful on this one.
We have somebody new.
Who is
it?
It's the Lost Adventurer.
Okay.
Well, give him a map and
not lost anymore.
Not lost anymore. He's found his home.
He's found his way here. So, and I believe he's a follower of yours, Sean, isn't he?
Yeah. We subscribe to each other's channels. Hello.
Yes. So, hello to Lost Adventurer.
Hello, Sean.
How are you guys doing? Yeah, I am a fellow Sean.
Aha, more Sean.
Well, that's too many Seans for me.
We're taking over.
We could always use some more. We even spell it the right way.
Well, I have a question for you based on that thing, because every Sean I know does that. It's either the HAUN or the AWN or the EAN. Is it Sean Bean, or should it be Scene Bean, or should it be how the hell is it? What's his? You can't have it both ways, man. Which is it?
Obviously,
and
you're
also-
just saying heresy over there because it's obviously Sean B. It's like Sean Connery.
Yeah, except Bean is spelled the exact same way as Sean, so therefore is it Sean?
Is it Sean
Bean,
Bond?
Sheen,
It's Sean Bond.
Sean Bond.
It's Sean Bond. Like, come on, man.
Okay. I'm going to say this much. If you're going to talk about the Seans, we had 3 Seans at work, and they all spelled Sean differently.
Of course they did. It's a made-up name, and I'm a Celt saying that.
It was SHAWN, SHON, and
Apostrophe,
SEAN.
exclamation point.
SHON is just heresy.
Yeah, seriously,
SHON.
that deserves a slap.
There's SION as well, which is Welsh.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The Welsh
SIAN
are not allowed to
is
spell anything.
Gaelic.
That's a rule. We have to make that a standard rule in English. The Welsh are not allowed to be responsible for spelling.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
I didn't
Not
think
until
could
they
spell in the
master
first place.
vowels.
But some of those
Right.
consonants are vowels.
Next question I've got for you lot on stream. Right, what happens when resources run out?
They
Of
die.
game-
They lose.
in terms of game mechanics. Now, first things first, I am going
Just
to dump
instantly ragdoll like a video game.
I'm going to dump on 5th edition here because I think this is a problem with 5th edition.
No,
in that-
5th edition just sucks in general. Personal opinion. Sorry.
Because one of the problems I have with 5th edition is that it's set up so that resources don't run out. Mages, clerics, everybody who can cast spells has got cantrips. You've got rangers and certain
we're getting
backgrounds at low
feedback.
levels. So yeah, somebody's feeding back. Who's feeding back?
I don't think it's me, but hold on.
Oh, it was Lost Adventure. Lost Adventure's feeding back a little bit.
Yeah.
And where was I? You've got a very easily acquired ability for from a background or from rangers where they can just find food in an environment. It's very, very simple. Wands recharge at dawn,
Mm-hmm.
and hit points aren't a particularly scarce resource because they're recovered so easily, so quickly. So there's in old school games, what would often happen is they'd go into the dungeon, they'd make a little bit of headway, and then be forced to back out and replan. And that's something I think is lost in this this new style of gaming that 5th edition has pretty much, certainly, even though it made claims initially that it was rolling things back in terms of how D&D felt. Certainly the way things have gone in the last 3 or 4 years, it's gone very much down the more modern style in the way things are presented, in the way adventures are written, and so on.
Imposing consequences is really up to the DM, though.
I blame Seattle. Eli?
I like to see those consequences in the
Having
mechanics.
known people who worked for WotC and been friends with people who worked for WotC, trust me, a lot of them would rather have it other ways as well.
No, for sure.
I'm going to bring up.
Zor commands us.
I'm going to bring the other part is when we're talking about, when they're going back and forth over this. Well, money doesn't really mean anything in 5th edition. Most of the resources don't mean anything because you have unlimited cantrips. Okay, so I'll just spam it. Sometimes when you do the darker stuff, it actually helps. I mean, when you run out of money, you're going to starve in D&D. If you're going to do starvation, there's a lot of stuff in there. It's like, well, what are you going to do? It's just like if we want to talk about this, I know we were talking about sleep in the 1st edition reduced your level until you got enough sleep again.
Fatigue.
What's that?
Fatigue.
Fatigue.
Yeah, lack of sleep, basically.
Lack of sleep.
But
That's the most brutal spell ever.
So, when you get these things, I think that's something that needs to be looked at. Is
Somebody else hearing that?
Yeah. There is a feedback on
Is
that.
that my Soviet number station telling me what to do for the rest of the day? I'm confused.
Yeah. You know what? If you have enough tinfoil, again, This is a resource.
I think he was
management,
having
you should be
connection
okay.
issues.
It
Oh,
does
that
look
was him. I thought it was Omenal because he was talking and I was hearing it. I was like, what was going on? Weird.
No,
No, that's
Yeah,
just
I think-
Omenel talking. No.
Oh,
Exactly.
ouch!
Hey, Omenal and I have our own channel on John's
their
server.
conflicts.
So
Yes,
Well,
I've
well,
seen.
well, you know
yeah.
what's funny is we just stopped arguing over certain things, and that's
the arguments were always fun
yeah.
jousts, anyways. So
Oh, I know. It was
So-
going back and forth.
So, Omanel, on the money being meaningless in fifth ed, I disagree. Again, you have to use the rules that are there. For my fifth ed game, I charge them the daily expense, and they find they never have enough money. Like they're scrambling for money all the time because I have beggared them by simply imposing the rules that are in the book. You have to pay your way. You have to spend your gold a day. And after, if they take some downtime, they realize, oh crap, we're broke. So I'm finding that the amount of money that gets awarded in terms of treasure is actually nice and low. It keeps them poor.
Well,
I will
and,
say the
easy to
rules
take
as
on
written do not make resources count worth of crap. I mean, honestly, they really don't lean into it as much as the old games did. I mean, yes, money you can keep your players poor, but they're not having to spend their money on everything else. So they generally, in my experience, they usually have enough to cover their expenses anyways, because they're not having to spend it on expendables.
yeah, I mean, and that's part of and what's the negative if you don't have enough money? That's part of the things that come in there. And whereas, I find it interesting is the Warhammer Fantasy role play. Boy, there you want to talk about resources all in there. They even say, we encourage players to be poor so they keep adventuring. Otherwise, they can't hold up. And the other
That's
part,
the original point of adventuring, wasn't it?
well, and then the other point was that
Unless you're a cavalier, and then you're wealthy.
well, no, I mean, but in Warhammer, in fourth edition, you have your 4 levels basically in there, and it's a social status as much as anything else. So in your career, if you can't pay for that career, you go down 1 until you can start paying for things. So if you're at gold 1, which is gold's fairly uncommon. Oh, I'm paying gold 1. If I can't keep that up, then I move down to level 3. And then if I can't do that, it goes down to level 2. And then you're like, and that makes a big difference in what you can learn and what you can do, and then how you're viewed for the social status. And unfortunately, it's not that 5th edition can't do it. It's just not built into the rules like it was in the earlier editions of maintaining your status.
I mean, both Sean and I have found ways to do. Like my characters are always running into problems with resources, and when the ranger wants to use his ability to be able to produce food, I make the player do that in the game. Like, okay, you don't just get to magically produce food. Okay, your character has to spend X amount of time out in the woods looking for things. Now I'm going to roll for an encounter. Yes, you will find the food by the rules, but as a GM, as the DM, I can sit there and I can adjudicate.
Yeah.
But the
just
thing is,
appear. Yeah.
but the rules don't say that, and that's the problem. I think with 5th edition is that you can do all kinds of stuff. Like I can start slinging the exhaustion rules around as much as I want, and I love those exhaustion rules. But
Am I playing a druid? Am I playing a druid? Because I'll just make a good berry and undo all of your planning.
It's funny. We were with Goodberry. What we had several rounds of discussion when setting up Saxius's game that I'm playing in. We started out with we were going to do this very gritty healing and stuff and resource management, and then we kind of all came back around to let's just play it rules as written and see if it's even a problem. Goodberry has appeared in the game, but honestly, it hasn't actually made that big of a difference.
It's going to undo starvation.
My characters are facing the same thing. They're the good berries. Oh yeah, I have good berries, and he has rolled 1 3 times in a row. And it's like, yeah, well, you don't have enough good berries. I hope you brought rations.
Well, the other point is I'm not against some of this. Like most things, that the system isn't bad. It's whenever it's abused. It's like, well, it's rules as written. I said, yeah, but you also have to get into the spirit of the game for the players. And I think sometimes, 5th edition has no problems with people getting into the spirit of it. It's whenever you have the one, which is what I hate, and I know that John hates it. Whenever you say you're going to build a character, and I'm going to dip in this class and dip in that class, and you're like, well, wait a minute. You're gaming the system instead of really trying to play a character.
One of the
You're playing the
biggest
system. Yeah.
problems with 5e, though, honestly, is that 5e assumes a certain number of fights that I have never seen in a session of 5th edition. And that's where that Goodberry argument comes in. Like, oh, the Goodberry, like, okay, well, what are you going to cast today? Goodberry? Or are you going to hold on to that slot to fight one of the 5 encounters you're supposed to have in a session in an adventuring day or something like that?
I tossed that requirement out the window because it's not realistic.
Well, no, it's not a
never
requirement.
know what's going to happen.
But the game is built around that, is what I'm saying. The game assumes that as a core concession.
Yes.
And so if you're not having that in your session, then things like Goodberry and stuff become a problem because the player is not forced to make that decision of whether he's going to cast Goodberry or hold on to it to cast, Firebolt or whatever he's going to, some other more important spell. It's another problem with 5th edition that has all this stuff going on, but you kind of, if you don't play it the way it's supposed to play, then it's even worse. So.
Piglet spotted my typo. I forgot to fix my typo in the stream title.
Well, that's good because now people can see. But well, no, I mean, so much of the game.
Monogament.
All games, and we're going to talk about this, which I'm more familiar with, is Palladium.
Monogament. Sorry, Omanel. We've got a gag. We're running with it.
That's fine.
Monogament.
It's become the Office all of a sudden. It's the first.
This is brilliant. We have a room full of people in their 40s
Office.
and 50s reduced to tears by a Muppets gag. That's genius.
I know.
Yes.
Hey.
Yes.
And then Omanel, like a laser, is focused on. I want to talk about this thing.
No.
We'll shut up.
No. I was going to say we're like what, Waldorf and what was the other guy's name?
Statler and Waldorf.
Yes. Yeah. See, so we're up in there throwing stuff. Actually, that's L. L is more like that than anybody else. But no, the whole thing that starts coming down to all
the
this.
biggest resource I lost is the time I spent watching the stream. Yeah,
Good thing you don't have much left.
Well, exactly. But I think that's the other part too. Is what is every game? The resource management determines the feel of the game.
Absolutely.
That's one of the biggest things there. And I think that's an important part. But the other part is, I'm trying to think of what other resource management until you really start getting the domain level. Most of it is okay. Money, time, encumbrance, and you can talk about hit points and stuff. It's like okay, but you got some health in there, and then you run with it. And I think sometimes, and this is the problem I've found with a lot of 5-player groups. Everyone talks about 5e, but it really depends on the group. But well, you know what? I'm just giving a bag of holding, so I don't have to worry about encumbrance. Oh, I'm just giving this, so I don't have to worry about this. And it starts trivializing it to the point that it's just combat. Combat doesn't have the same gravitas that it used to. Oh, I'm going to fight and I might not make it out. The assumption is you're going to make it out, even unless it's a really tough fight. And some of them, when you start getting the fortune and stuff like this. Well, if I only put one monster, let's talk about the DM resources here on what they have to do. As a DM, now I have to make sure there are enough monsters that they can't just cast like a whole person, and then they get to re-roll that savings throw, and they get to do this. At which point it makes the fight trivial. That's the other part that comes into it is now you can't just do one big bad boss in most cases unless you want to.
Yeah, I mean, lack of resource management, it trivializes a lot of aspects of the game, and the biggest impact it has is on the exploration tier. The biggest single impact is on the exploration tier.
The sad part to me is I think there's a lot of players out there who would enjoy resource management play, but they buy into the hype that it's bad. Because face it, there's a lot of theory out there and a lot of theory crafting and a lot of theory rage. People screaming at stuff after just reading it on a page and never having played it. And then you get these people who play the games and they're like, well, this seems kind of bleh, it's not that fun. Well, yeah, because you pulled, like I always talk about, that resource management invites adventure. It creates plot and story. Finding the healer for, your party member, running out of it, arrows when you're, 3 levels down in a dungeon, getting your stuff swept away, crossing the river because you slipped off the log. That whole ass quest you go on to get the party member resurrected. Those kind of things.
Journey to the city, which is the only place you can get certain spell components.
Yeah, that scarcity, that resource management, it pads out. Not even pads the wrong word because it has such a negative connotation. It fills out the campaign. A lot of the fun that I remember, the stuff that I really remember from my olden days of gaming older systems, is not because we went in there, we kicked that dragon's ass, and it was a breeze. Or remember that time we slew all those orcs and never broke a sweat? No, it's like, God, remember when the paladin was unconscious and we had to get him out of the dungeon, but we also needed to carry that giant ass artifact and all of our iron spites and stuff.
You remember the struggles. Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
Well, and I will say this much. I know we talked a little bit about the strength beforehand. When the magic user had to pull out the dagger because they ran out of spells,
absolutely,
there was an absolute desperation in that fight of, will you come out alive or not? Before then, while you have it, and that's part of the thing of when they start saying, well, we did a focus, now you don't have to do this. That's why I said it's more of a Harry Potter. Oh, as long as I have my wizard wand, I can cast whatever cantrip. And I'm not sure if you guys actually mentioned it. Let's not forget traveling spell books and regular spell books as resource management, because now, how much does the spell book cost, which is one aspect. How much can I carry, and then how much can I learn? So, in the Unearthed Arcana, which is one of the things.
How much time do you have to prepare it?
Yeah, well, that's the one aspect. But your traveling spell book is, well, I got my big spell book at home, and I don't want to carry that. So let me get a traveling spell book, which means now I have to plan accordingly on what spells I'm going to bring with me to cast. So it's not just what do I learn; it's also what do I have available for any of it anyway. So there's that aspect. And admittedly, I think someone was putting up like an 18th level magic user would take 8.5 hours or something to memorize all of their spells in one.
More than that. I remember the Dragon article on it. It was like days of study. They depleted their entire spell catalog. It was like insane how long it would take them.
Well, you got 15 minutes per spell level, right? So it adds up when even one 8th level spell is a 2-hour affair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, those when it adds up to all that, and then also you're going, okay, well, where do we sleep? And also then it starts making certain spells much more useful. When you start getting the tiny hut and stuff. Oh, okay, I can go there, or I can go over here.
One of my tweaks to 5th edition was specifically to bring back that idea of spellcasters running out of spells. I wanted to see a wizard reach for a sling or a druid pull out his staff because they'd got no spells left.
Well, there's also the way you use spells in old school where you have to fix the spell you want. Vancian style versus the spell point system where you have your catalog and you just pick the one you need.
Yes.
Spell slots are still a resource, but it's even more precious when I've only got the one magic missile and the will-o'-the-wisp is going to kill us. I better have it ready to go, right?
One of my favorite moments in gaming in the last 10 years was running a group through the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, of course, because it's such a great adventure. And the party had got...
That I never.
You added an extra finger there, but
I did the British way.
No, I actually like it. I just had to give you shit. So it's no Forest Oracle.
Good. And the party had managed to get on the deck of the ship at the end, and they all clambered aboard. And they'd got a first level magic user in the party who used his spell, and he got cornered on the deck by one of the regular smugglers. First level magic user, AC 10. He had about 4 hit points, and he had a dagger or a staff. I can't remember which. He had a frying pan. He had a frying pan that he picked up because he'd lost his weapon somehow. So he was fighting with a proficiency penalty. I ruled the frying pan would do 1d4 damage. It was this heavy skillet that he picked up for cooking purposes. And he was up against a smuggler, AC 6 or 7, about 8 hit points, fighting with a longsword, and was stuck in one-on-one combat, couldn't get away. The smuggler basically pinned him on one part of the deck. All his rest, he'd been trying to hide away from the melee, trying to get away from it all. And so it was a one-on-one combat between the two, and the magic user won. But it's somehow he rolled 3 consecutive rolls of 18 or higher on a d20 to hit. The smuggler rolled 6 or lower, 7 or whatever it was, or lower on every single roll. Didn't even hit him. And the magic user managed to kill the smuggler in 3 rounds of beating him over the head with a skillet because he'd run out of spells.
And this is where I was half joking when I said having a high strength magic user is important.
Wasn't.
It's no. I mean, I know we're all joking about it, but usually the high intelligence, other than learning the spells, really doesn't come into effect for magic users unless you're talking about languages until they can't get past 4th or 5th level spells. And you're like, well, how often are your characters advancing where that's really an issue? So, that's why I laugh about it. It's like, I put 18 intelligence in my magic user. Your magic user is probably never going to get to the 18th level to actually cast a 9th level spell. He's much better actually taking a better dexterity, especially constitution or strength at lower level, where he can actually be somewhat useful for the first few levels.
And actually survive.
Yes. Exactly.
While you're at it, just stop taking combat spells and take utility spells.
Utility.
Oh,
I mean, spells as a resource as well. I mean, spells are very much a predictable resource now. That you choose the spells you want. You can pick from what you've got in your list pretty much at will while you're adventuring, because it uses like a spell slot system rather than the Vancian magic. And back in early versions of D&D, you weren't even guaranteed to be able to learn every spell on that list.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, not only that is you weren't even guaranteed to learn the spells you wanted to learn.
Oh no, you weren't even guaranteed to find the spells you wanted.
Well, that's the other part. As a DM, we're talking about resource management, and I think sometimes we're always looking at the players. As a DM, you have the ability to limit what the players get and what you want to do with it. Yeah. So, if you always find out, like, I don't like Fireball, you don't have to put Fireball in anyone's spell books. And that's the other part is, when we're talking about resource management, it also comes down to, when we're talking about treasure, what am I going for? It's the same thing with the Holy Avenger. It's like, oh, you can hear about it, you can talk about it, but you may never find one. And I think that's the thing that sometimes players or DMs forget is you don't have to give players what they want. You give players what they need. And those are 2 different things.
I agree with Andy's comment here.
Yeah.
I'd be a lot less negative towards 5th edition's cantrips if there were none of them that dealt damage.
I wish that they would have limited cantrips based on, I don't care if it's your level plus your intelligence or something. I would be happier with that. In certain cases, and we can get into this, but I like the limited ability of cantrips so players can think about it. Not that you only cast one. Like, I'll be honest, magic users were kind of bad in 1st edition. You sit around, cast my 1 spell, and now you might as well take the high strength magic user, because once you cast your 1 sleep spell, the only thing you can really do is throw stuff in the back or carry things. You can have some language if you get good charisma, but
I was about to ask there who got the super chat bit. Mage?
That came to my end. Yeah,
you have $2 from all ones.
No. He got it. All comes forgets. Fireball means no characters because they all die when they cast the first time.
Well,
build the space.
I want to address Omanel's comment about mages being useless once they've blown off their wad. I fundamentally disagree. And the reason being is that's only if you're considering you're coming from the perspective of once you're out of your class ability, you're of no more use. I mean, you're still a person in that situation. You have a mind. As you say, you can sit back and toss flame bombs, but you can still guide. You can still be on watch. You're still participating in the scenario. You've just used up your magical ability. But there's still so much you can do. You're still a participant in the game.
Well, at that point, really, is an ideal world is you're the one that can read and write, and then the other one is you're the one that usually will be mapping, which is another aspect that we have lost in the new editions. The most part is, and okay, I'm bad about this too now. But when I was a kid, I was always the person that mapped the dungeon. It doesn't matter what I was doing, I always. And I would go through. It's because everyone else was doing their thing. In the meantime, I'm measuring in how wide the corridor is, so I could make sure that my map was good. And I said, if anything happened, I was the one that knew how to run out of the dungeon, not the other players.
And that is important. If there's another resource is the mapping.
There's another resource: the people that you can leave behind you as you run out of the dungeon to slow down the monsters chasing you.
Yeah.
No,
I don't have to outrun the monster. I just have to outrun you.
My 5th edition hack was very similar. I did casting modifier plus proficiency bonus in terms of spells, cantrips per day.
I do level plus proficiency bonus myself, but capped in any case.
Anyway, actually, mine was level plus proficiency bonus. Same. I'm misremembering. Yeah, level plus proficiency bonus. So, typically 3 at first level. I want to go back to the idea of non-damaging cantrips. I just want to tell a little story. I've probably told it before, but not everyone in chat will have heard it. I was playing a 5th edition wizard in a campaign a few years back, and we were in a pool of water with sharks approaching, and I looked at the description of prestidigitation, and it mentioned that you can create smells and tastes. So what do sharks go for? Blood.
Oh, I was going to say peanut butter. You win.
So I created, I said to the DM, I'm going to create the taste or smell, whichever, of blood in the water at the full range of the spell from me, which happens to be where that lead shark is. And the DM looked at me, grinned, and said, well done. All the sharks turning on each other. Suddenly the blood is choked with water, and you've got time to get out.
I mean,
Off you go.
You talk about cantrips. I did like cantrips when they were brought into 1st edition and 2nd, but I like the fact that they were limited number per day. And that's the problem that I have with it is where they can just spam things, and it's like, oh, I can just do men. I can do men for this, and I can do men for that. No, look, stop it. Or I can do heat and cold. It removes some of the thought process of, or the, they said, well, I can just do it over and over again without any worry. And that sometimes makes it boring for the DM. People forget that resource management isn't just for the players. It's for the DM to enjoy giving challenges to the player. I think that's part of what I'm talking about. Same thing with monsters. If you're starting to bypass things, all of a sudden now I have to do resource management as the DM to make sure that I'm both challenging the players and I'm having fun by challenging the players.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to come to a couple of comments here. Saurian's mentioned instantly soiling or cleaning an item can be quite useful if used creatively. Yeah, you can cast it on an opposing an enemy's pants.
Oh yeah,
I knew you were going there.
This game back at the home base, the fort that we're based out of. We've already introduced the neighbors to our bunkhouse there, to our mages, our wizards, mending spell and all of that. So he's selling it as a service to the rest of the folks in the fort. Oh, your pants are ripped. Okay, let me fix those for you. A couple of silver here, a couple of silver there.
And here, GM Cody gets this right. Mages are only useless if you want them to be. You've got high intelligence, And if you've got a high charisma, yeah, lots of henchmen, buy guard dogs. You haven't got much else to spend money on at first level in
I feel like
old school
a
games.
good GM's going to put stuff in there if he knows he's got a wizard.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now let's come to All Ones, is because All Ones has paid Mage for this. So thank you again, All Ones, giving lots of money to Mage tonight. So
got to get me to that first withdrawal threshold.
Okay, I'm going to bring something up, which is a different game system, which I kind of like about this. And he's right if it's super rare, but I did like the fact that there were on the Monty Cook games, whenever he does Numenera or his cipher, the cipher system is the over encompassing one. I do like the idea of what they call I just remember what they were and I just forgot what they're called. But they're basically one shot items, and they can be anything from you feel you feel invigorated because you did something. They're called ciphers, is what they're called. But the cipher is, instead of giving a lot of artifacts, you can give ciphers, and the expectation is that the players are supposed to burn to the ciphers fairly quickly, and they get replenished with other ciphers fairly quickly. And you can get subtle, and you also don't worry about how big it is. It's like, oh, okay, if I give an overpowered item, it only gets one use. I don't worry about it. Whereas in some cases, if you give an overpowered artifact, you have really removed a lot of the challenges for the players.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons that I like ciphers from that aspect.
I like powerful single-use items because it usually guarantees that the players will use them in a meaningful manner. I mean, if they choose not to use them, it's up to them. It's their choice.
Yeah.
But you find that they tend to use them in a meaningful, memorable manner. And I like that.
And I like some of the ciphers. Now, Millie, this is for Numenera. You put on a glove. It allows your hand to go through solid objects for 5 minutes, and then it's gone. At which point you're like, oh, that's kind of a cool power, but when do you use it and how?
Speaking to All Ones' comment here, one of the reasons you have seen a shift in the way magic items work in D&D is because of that, the hoarding. There has been a dialogue in like Dragon articles and stuff over the years about having all those magic items being kind of pointless because players would just sit there and hold on to them and never use them because they were afraid to use them. So making them more usable was one of the things that they sort of worked into later editions.
But the rarity of use was what made them special in a lot of cases.
True, but are they really that special if nobody, from a playing standpoint, they looked at it, are they really worth having in the game if nobody's using them? I mean, that's
you gotta
why
learn when and where to use them.
Learning when, getting the right moment.
True, but even with players of old school games, they would sit on them. I've seen it done. I've heard the complaints. People would just sit there and never use the one shot item because this isn't the time. The next time's not the time. And yes, that is a way to play, and it's a research management, but there is a reason why that changed. I mean, 4th edition changed really hardcore on that. If you remember, you could just melt your magic item down and have it turned into something else and go get the magic item you wanted.
I'd rather they have the choice. They sit on the magic item for as long as they like. Than
I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying I understand why it happened, and there's a reason why it happened.
The evolution is clearly there. But it just boils down to, I mean, that's just also a part of things became more convenient. Everything in 5e, and I don't know about 4e, but everything in 5e is about convenience. And whereas
because 5e also wanted to get away from one of the things that Geek mentioned earlier, going down to the dungeon, tooling around for a bit, having to pull back, going back in. They wanted to remove the rinse and repeat and keep people in the dungeon and going through the dungeon.
I'm going to bring up one other point there. Is we also have to remember in 1st edition, the expectation was each group would be going through the same dungeon multiple times, which is why all of us hated it. Why can my people only pick the lock one per level? Well, that was kind of a way of preventing groups from accessing parts of the dungeon until they finally got a thief that opened that door, and now that whole new thing could open up. Or you'd say, okay, we'll try a different thief. And I think that that's part of sometimes, the way that we played was not the way that Gygax played. And I don't mean, the rules as written. I'm saying as far as his groups. He had multiple groups, multiple nights, all going through, and they were all rotating in, whereas almost all of us had the same group every time we played with the same players and same characters. And I think that's that's a big difference of what we're looking at. Where the way Gygax played versus the way that we played as youngsters.
We also have to look at the fact that, the expected party size back then was like 6 to 8 people too.
Oh yeah.
And that gives you the party a lot more resources, especially if you factor in henchmen, all of that. So with fourth and that also then communicates forward to like 5th edition again, where they expect a party size of on average 4, maybe 6, but it's written around 4. Yeah. So each character has to actually pull more weight. That's why that specialization left out of the game.
Yeah.
Good or bad, it's the why.
Well, no. I agree with you on that. But I mean, what is it? One of them where they're talking about the ability to evade. If you have less than 25, and all we think is like, how the hell do you even get up to 25? Well, when you start adding all those retainers and everything else, I have 6 to 8. And my charisma allows me to get 4 henchmen. And
or you just have a bunch of hired mercs.
No. But I mean, if you look at it, what is the evasion table? If you look at the evasion table, it's like, if you have 50. If you notice for 25, if you have 25 or less, it's actually pretty easy to evade a large group, which is funny because most of us thinking, what party has 25? But you're right. After I bring in my retainers and my hirelings and the porters and everybody,
6 players
and your pack animals
each year, there's your 25, 30 people.
Well, exactly. All of a sudden, you're starting to look over and you're going, okay, now this looks like, and I'm sure that they did this. Is the, it looks more like a wagon train that's used by the conquistadors, to go find the lost city of gold, rather than the way that we're thinking of, like, just 4 players, plucky adventurers go off into the woods. No, that's nothing like what it was in the old D&D. It was the whole,
and all the conquistadors would die of disease.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, remember, first edition had all that. Yep.
Well, if you remember, flat out, every time you went into a dungeon, there was X percentage chance you'd come out with a disease.
Sorry, let me mute.
Oh, okay.
Was it rotworms? Those were the best.
No, you could just pick up just general. And Gygax.
How did you get syphilis in the dungeon, man?
Some desktop guide to diseases and just splatted them on a page of the DMG.
Yeah.
But,
well, remember, some of them was like, you could get cancer. What is that? It's like within the first 25 pages, he includes your chances of getting disease per month.
Yep.
It was.
You died of dysentery.
Oregon Trail, lucky.
Flashbacks.
And to be fair on some of this is by the time you got up to about 4th or 5th level, much of what, and especially when you get higher levels, the expectation is those higher level characters. Whereas in D&D, I think 5e now, it's expected that it's going to come much earlier. But when you look at the layer levels, by the time you were in 9th level, they said, okay, look, you've done all resource management down to the smallest number. Whoops. But you've done. But
came back.
Well, no. But you've done all of your resource management. Here's a bag of holding. Here's this. Here's this spell. And so then they start making that aspect much more trivial for your resource management because they assume that, look, you've done that for the last 6 months or 12 months. Mm-hmm. You've had your resource management. It's not as big of a deal. We'll give you powers and abilities and magic items to make a lot of those things trivial.
So now the game can be fun? I don't understand what the logic is on that.
No. But what I'm saying is, but for 5e, the players haven't gotten through that. So, at that point, you're doing world-spanning, let's be honest, 9th through 14th level, you were expected to take out Lolth? Really? I mean,
playstyle and expectations from the game were a lot different back then, I think, too, for a lot of people. I mean, there were much more gamist aspects to D&D back in the day, and the presumption when you sat down to play was that it was a game. So
but
you had
there
pieces.
There was also the bragging aspect. If when you started looking at, like, remember how they had all the titles? By the time you were 9th level and you became a lord, you were really,
Yeah.
you had done all of the basic stuff, and now they were saying, okay, how do we get rid of all this? Because you fought your dragons, you've gotten hundreds of thousands of gold. Okay, now it's like, how do we drain it from that? It's like, okay, and you go
You have
through
to
the whole
feed your dragon.
well, there were some of them like
How
that.
many pounds of food does a dragon
ain't
eat?
cheap, man. I'm telling you, dragon chow costs money.
Oh yeah.
Well, no, that's when you build your own dungeon and start circulating a rumor that there is a great treasure in it, but it's just your dragon at the center of it.
It's just feeding your dragon. I love this. This is a good plan.
We've been focusing on D&D, and I'm going to jump over now to. I want to hear from Bear
What?
about Against the Dark Master, because
What do you want to
I'm
hear
a
about
merc.
it?
I'm a merc player.
Uh-huh.
And one of the aspects of merc that I like, and I know people find it fiddly, is the way that encumbrance affects your moving maneuver abilities, which affects all your moving maneuver skills.
Mhm.
And I like the way that hit points are a very precious resource, in a sense that if you drop below half hit points, you get -20 to
Yes.
absolutely everything.
Yes.
Is that in Against the Dark Master? Is all that in there?
That part about the hit points is definitely in the Against the Dark Master. It sucks. Like, people hate it because it's, the death spiral mentality, but I love it because
I love it as well.
Nothing pisses me off more in D&D than I have 1 hit point left and I fight just as well as if I had full hit points.
Yeah.
Well, but that's because it's not really representing wounds. It's oh, shut up. Just shut up. I've never played any D&D anywhere with anyone when you got hit, the DM didn't describe the blade hitting you. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
So yeah, no, I think Against the Dark Master has that. I know it has the penalty for wounds. I don't know about the encumbrance. I hate encumbrance. I just tend not to read encumbrance rules as often as possible to make my life easier, because I don't like resource management. Going all the way back to the beginning of my part of this conversation.
Well, that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I remembered you saying that, and I'm thinking, hang on, MERP, and by nature, Against the Dark Master does have these nitty-gritty aspects.
Yes, but you can choose to use them or not. I mean, they're a toggle.
Of course you can.
They're a lever.
Of course you can.
Yeah.
Of course you can.
There's one thing when you look at basic, which they said encumbrance is optional, and I'm not sure. It's important when it's important, and it's like, look, if it seems unreasonable, we'll track encumbrance. If it seems like it's reasonable that you can carry that stuff, then we don't track encumbrance. I think that there's this. It's not an all or nothing aspect to it in certain cases.
Oh, I'll say now. I use the simplified encumbrance in OSC.
Mm-hmm.
When I run D&D, I use the coin-based encumbrance.
Mm-hmm. The simplified one in OSC is basically you move according to your armor, unless you're overburdened with what other things you're carrying. In which case
you're overburdened with guilt for the choices you've made in life.
yeah. In which case you move one category slower, and I basically say, look, overburdened classes as a large sack full of treasure, and adventuring gear, unless you go stupid with it, is okay. But if you get this large sack, a 60-pound sack of treasure, then you are going to be slowing down. There you go.
And I think that in many ways that's the threading the needle between the two. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to count this. Well, if you go 1 gold piece over, then you slow down immediately. I know you talked about that earlier. It's like, okay, look, what does your armor have? Okay, you're going to be slowed down a bit for your armor. Okay, then we're going to do that. Okay, you know what? If it seems like you're carrying something reasonable, that's fine. If it isn't, then it's like, hey, you know what? Let's count it up. That's like
resource management for me tends to be a kind of a sliding scale too. It's like, okay, when I start to feel like they're abusing it, then I'll start to like, how many arrows you got there?
Oh yeah.
How many days worth of food you got there? If they're like, oh, there's a bear, I'm gonna give him like 2 days of rations and try and make him, make him my friend. Oh wait, we met goblins, I'm gonna give away all my food. And then when they get to the wilderness, you're like, so how many rations do you have left?
Yeah, that's when I start paying attention. That are with us, they're gonna make good eating.
Well, the other part is that some things are not heavy; they're just bulky, and so you're going, okay, how are you going to carry all of that? Because now you don't have enough room to physically fit it. It's like Okay, I'm going to carry a bunch of beach balls that are inflated. Well, how many can you carry? It doesn't matter about the weight. The weight isn't the issue with beach balls. In most cases,
I put it in the comments about mundane books. The players in my game realized how much just regular books, not magic books, were worth. Like 100, hundreds of gold per volume, right? Because they're so rare, and they'd run into a library.
If you ever DM'd a game and got your bag full of books and taken them to a session, you know how much those buggers weigh.
Well, and the thing is, though, here they are, like, we can't leave these here. We've got to get all 400 books out of this wizard's library because, we'll be set. And, next thing you know, they're, like, measuring out their cart and, building frames out of the furniture. Well, if we break down the bookcases, we can build a travois that we can drag out the dungeon.
Oh, yeah, that keeps that moment they realize there's a wizard with a nice juicy spell book standing right there, and they're broke, and he's not paying attention right now. Doggy.
Well, Dylan Thomas, when he rolls, he finds out that he can't learn any of the spells because he got higher than what he's supposed to have. No, it's what do you mean? Well, you rolled a 95 and a 95 and a 98, and well, you didn't learn anything.
I mean, we were talking about two-handed swords earlier about the encumbrance thing. Was it encumbrance 250 coins or something? A two-handed sword in real life weighs about 4 or 5 pounds.
Oh yeah,
right. Nothing. Well, because encumbrance, as I said before, is the coin-based encumbrance system is an abstraction of bulk as well. So you don't have to do the micro calculations, get bulk. It's like, all right, it weighs 1,500 coin. Well, that's a combination of the bulk and the actual weight.
Yeah, it's unwieldy.
Right now, my fighter in the game I'm playing with Saxius is a two-handed sword fighter primarily, but I have shorter arms that I carry with me because I as a player know that I can't, it's not realistic for me to be swinging that thing around, but it also means that a lot of times I'm wandering across the countryside doing this, shorter
on my shoulder. Can you use those shorter arms to carry extra items?
Yes,
like a T-Rex?
Like little T-Rex arms here.
Exactly.
I can cast spells simultaneously while fighting in melee combat.
That's using your noggin.
I'm sorry. Are you playing the Green Martians of
No, 3 green. No.
I'm
playing a human.
Well, those
I play humans.
but I mean, those are things that this is where the dwarf is supposed to come into. Look, you can carry more encumbrance, but you just can't move quickly. That's one of the things I like about certain ones of these. And I don't mind the different methods of encumbrance. Okay, are you doing slots? Is it a heavy? Is it a medium? Is it a small? And then it's a trivial. I think it's kind of how, I want to say the Free League stuff does a lot of times. Some of them do slots.
OSC has an optional slot system.
Yeah.
I've been tempted by it.
Give them the video game style actual slots where they have to the sword is this long and you have to fit it in there. Well, those inventory systems.
Well, you know what? That would probably be pretty cool if you had a magnetic board and the players just put it up on there. It's like, oh, here's your item, And
oh yeah, I mean, I don't know how when I'm playing computer games with advanced inventory systems like that, I don't know how often I've just sat there hidden behind a tree in the woods so no other player can find me. All right, if I put the axe here, and then I put the assault rifle here, and the 3 boxes of ammo.
Well, exactly. Well, and those are, sometimes I want to put this. Video games allow you to do that automatically without the tediousness of, as everyone going through there and saying, okay, let's all measure this out. But I think that those are, well, sometimes whenever they have item cards, D&D doesn't do it so much, but I know the stuff by Free League, it does. It tells you what it goes through there. But it's the same thing when all these players decide, I'm carrying this many guns. I said, well, okay, look, how are you doing this? Because I've carried stuff. And I'm like, all right. You're carrying a rifle. Well, I carry this rifle, and then I carry this, and I carry this, and they're like, okay.
We had a bard in one of my games with my teenagers where the bard insisted on carrying 5 different instruments, and I immediately just threw a picture of one of those one-man bands at the player. I'm like, this is you going through the dungeon. She's like, I like that. I'm going to try and stealth. I'm like, how? How are you going to try and use stealth? Honk, kink, bonk, ting, ting. It's like, that's you going through the dungeon.
Oh, that's genius.
Hey, the symbols are silent, I swear.
Everything's got to be wrapped in cloth.
I just cast the silence 15-foot radius on a coin and put it in their purse.
Or you have that bard player who decides to be really quirky. What's your instrument of choice? A glockenspiel,
A harpsichord.
wind chimes, bling.
A marching band. A what now?
Someone's mentioned Twilight 2000. I've never played it. I've heard it's very, very clunky.
That is a game where resource management is key because it's absolutely about survival.
Well, which version of Twilight 2000?
Well, the original.
Because Free League has done their new stuff now, and
Free League. I haven't played Free Leagues. I played first and second edition Twilight 2000.
Yeah. That's what I'm asking is because everyone, whenever we talk about some of these, almost all of the systems that came from the 80s are in their third or fourth edition, whether you like it or not. I mean, even came out
I don't like it,
except for Star Frontiers. A moment, please.
Yes.
I just want to quickly reply to all ones here. We're mainly focusing on D&D because that is the sort of central point that we all know. And I'd like to just quickly go around the table and just tell everyone in chat what we're currently running, so that people have got an idea. I'm currently running an OSE game, which of course is BX. I've just finished running a Call of Cthulhu game, and I also run a fortnightly MERP game. Those are what I'm running at the moment. Mage, I know you're doing D&D.
Yeah, I'm all D&D in terms of what I run. I'll sit in on other games. Like I would like to try new systems once in a while, but
I've run some Call of Cthulhu for you, haven't I? For example.
Yeah. Call of Cthulhu. We were talking on Legion's stream last week. I was talking about Lex Arcana that I tried a few months back, which was pretty interesting. But for the most part, I mean, my time and finances have been invested in D&D, so that's what I'll run.
For me, D&D right now. I would love to run other stuff, but I'm currently held hostage by my gaming group.
But again, we have played a little bit of online Call of Cthulhu a month or two back.
That is true. I got that game, and I ran the game, and it went really well, and I was all jazzed to run more, and now I have no time.
Yeah, because work. Bear has made a point of not doing D&D things at the moment.
Yes, I've walked away from D&D happily, and my sanity returned with it. It was quite nice. I don't get into pointless arguments about encumbrance anymore. I just get into discussions about cool games.
I don't get into arguments either. I say you're doing encumbrance, and then that's it.
Sean, that's joke killing. That was mean of you. You know better.
Oh, you know I am the killer of jokes when they come from you.
Canadian fight! Go!
Oh, okay, fine. I'll meet you at the Timmy's and we'll settle this over a coffee.
Yeah, but I'm buying.
Fine, okay, but I insist on holding the door open for you.
But I insist on holding your car door open before you hold the Timmy's door open. So there.
It's going to be a sorry off.
Drive.
I'm just waiting them to say A. That's all I'm waiting for.
That is stereotypical and offensive.
Huh?
That's right.
Huh? I don't understand. Huh?
It's supposed to be.
So tell the nice people in chat what you're running at the moment.
Back to the actual conversational point. I'm running against the Dark Master right now. I'm playtesting my own system, Bastard Sword, and I may or may not be running a Marvel multiverse game at some point, but that's becoming less and less likely just based on time constraints.
And I'm going to say as much. The ones I've been playing right now are GURPS. I don't really like GURPS, but you go with the group that you're with, not with the one that you want.
It's a shame. GURPS says such nice things about you. It's really rude that you come on here and say you don't like GURPS when GURPS is your fan. Man, that's rude.
I thought people just bought GURPS and walked around professing how great it was, like some sort of street preacher.
They never actually play it. They just talk about how great it is.
They proselytize, GURPS.
But I'll say as much as I buy a lot of books to get ideas from them. And, I've seen the slot systems. I've seen the individual. I've gone through all of them. And in some cases, and I'm sure that Eli's done the same thing, you just start bastardizing the ones that you like that make sense, that are easy for the players to understand, and it's easy for you to keep track of and move on with your life. I think sometimes that, everyone wants to do, I only play this. Well, you know what? Sometimes you can go, this is perfect. It works this way. Sometimes but you have to understand the systems by reading them and appreciating what they are and understanding that when you start changing rules and how they're going to impact. But, I'll be honest, when my characters starting to come into it, I start carrying less and less equipment, just like in real life. It's like, well, what do I need? You know what? I got a backpack. That's my, my bug out bag in real life. I'm going to do the same thing for my characters. And the rest of it is like, well, what do you have? Well, I got a Swiss Army knife up there. I've got this, and if I need anything else, I'll go into my car and pull out the big stuff. You know,
What is this game? I'm trying to figure out which game you're running that does all this.
It's called Real Life.
Oh, I didn't know this was a game.
No, the
Sorry.
game of life sucks. I've
It's
played
the
it.
worst game of all. Yeah.
Can we just play Candyland and be done with it, please?
I do miss having a diverse group of players, like
Yeah.
back in the roommate days, where it was all of us, a bunch of gamers in the house. It's like we had characters made for everybody's campaign. We're like, what are we playing tonight?
But I mean, if you're playing a more modern one, like I'm playing a sci-fi one, like okay, but when we talk about sometimes encumbrance, that's what your players are going for in certain cases. But this is why I kind of like the ones that are you've got a ship. That's where all your equipment's being held. Your ship is mobile, but when you leave the ship, it's just like in real life when you have a car. When I leave this, what am I carrying with me? And that's what it comes down to. And having carried some stuff in real life, people carry way too much crap. And in real life, just like anything else, when you have to start paring things down, it's like, well, what can I do? Oh, I can remain a little cold. I can do this. I start getting rid of, okay, it's 0 degrees. I don't have to have cold weather gear unless I'm going to be outside for a long time. That's the first thing that goes. Because that is the most bulky crap that I have to carry anyway. And then you start saying, is this? And you start saying, do I need this? No, you throw it out. Do I need this? I throw it out.
I feel like that cold weather stuff was a shot at Canada, Sean. What do you think?
No, actually,
No, I don't think so.
Afghanistan when I was in the summer.
You are the worst to do improv with, Sean. I'm telling you this right now.
Only with you.
The other game
I like to poke the bear.
Oh,
The
yeah.
other game I've run recently, which has a very, very different resource system, is Paranoia.
Oh, yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah,
A
but
game I'd
Paranoia
love
is
to-
barely a game.
Oh, it is. It is. It's fantastic. It's great fun. Your resource system is basically how many treason points you've got and how many clones you've got left. That's it, really. And things that are going to explode when you try to use them. But you have to. You don't want to use them, but you have to because the computer asks you to. The computer wouldn't hurt you, would it? No. Are you happy? Yes. Good. Anyhow, I think we've pretty much hammered the topic of resource management. If there's anything else on resource management, anyone else wants to?
Well, tongue in cheek, sort of. Just remember, as a DM, you have a very important resource, and that's your player. And if you're too big of a dick when it comes to your game, you're not going to have any.
Wait. You know what you need to do is when I talk about resources, let's talk about maybe next week or something. Resources that you, as a DM and player, bring to the game itself so it runs more smoothly.
Food for the DM.
Pizza. Yeah.
I apparently have to have pencils on supply because my players don't know how to bring their own.
Oh, yes. Well, dice. Dice is one an important one, too. Yeah, but,
if you bring pizza, then make sure you also bring a gas mask.
make sure it's anchovies.
For you, lactose intolerant boy.
Yes.
I'm saying all the things that for next week is, we're all talking about this stuff as you're playing the game. What about stuff that you guys like to bring to the game itself to make it run more smoothly for you and your players? Or
Marijuana.
We already did house rules last week or the week before.
Yeah.
Something I take to the game are those.
Oh,
Any
cups?
idea why? Any idea why?
What are those?
We play with we play face to face. We play with a whiteboard, and I write on, draw everything out on that, very very loose. But there's limited table space. All you do, turn these up. Oh, there are things in that. Turn these up, put the board on these, and people tuck their character sheets underneath. Instantly creates extra feet of table space.
Yeah, that's a Kickstarter for that.
These are just cups. These are just plastic cups. That's all.
No, it's smart. I'm just saying someone out there did a Kickstarter where you could have a permanent version of that without cups.
Those cups didn't cost anything.
Well, your thievery habits are your own business, sir.
See, he knows how to do resource management. He takes it from other places.
So I'm just going to summarize my opinion on resource management. It's a general opinion for most of us, apart from Bear, who's
It's the contrarian of the group.
Yeah, contrarian. But my basic opinion is that accurate resource management enhances the game. It forces more creative thinking and forces more interaction with the game world. And I like that. I like it a lot. That's my opinion.
Does it make you happy?
Yes, it makes me happy.
Then that's all that matters.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
For me, it's like anything, like everything in moderation. Like I like using encumbrance. I like players tracking that sort of thing, but I don't want to go so far that we're calculating fluids to the millimeter, or, like I like coin-based encumbrance because it's an abstraction for bulk, and I say, okay, this thing weighs 130 coin, and then they can determine, oh, well, I've got enough space in my sack, or we can put it on the cart, or whatever, and that's good enough. Then off we go. But there is some element of that tracking there, and that minding what they've got, what they're carrying, ammunition, things like that.
Yes.
So
I don't disagree.
For me, honestly, I play with what the people at the table are going to enjoy. It's not a fight I'm really willing to have, because I'd rather just play games. So I'm not there to be a tin pot dictator and my way or the highway. And if nobody's having fun using resource management, yes, they may be missing out. And I believe that there's the potential to have more fun when you're tracking resources. If nobody's into it, then it's counterproductive. So for me, it's a take it or leave it thing. I like it personally, but not all the time.
One of my groups really wasn't into it, but they enjoyed Call of Cthulhu, which really doesn't hinge on the resource management so much. So I ran a lot of that for them, and that's where we met a common ground.
It's Call of Cthulhu. It hinges on not reading fucking books or anything else. Just don't read. Stop reading. My character survived. Why? He's illiterate and blind and deaf. I can't hear anything. I can't see anything, and I sure as shit can't read anything.
Looking at the Necronomicon didn't drive me mad.
Omanal famously succeeded, and I mentioned loads of times on stream. You succeeded because you critically failed a constitution check, didn't you? And you basically collapsed, worn out.
Well,
that meant.
There was that one. There were several of them where it was just kind of lucky. The one where I went berserk, and then I just kept following. The other part. Well, that's a little bit different. I agree with Bear. I agree with everyone, depending on how much it is. I kind of like the ones that are done in the free league systems, which is kind of a slot aspect. And then, if most of the time it's, does this seem reasonable? That's all I look at. Does this seem reasonable? And if you don't seem reasonable, we're going to start tracking encumbrance because you're gaming it. But other than that, I kind of like the OSC. Here's your armor. This is your speed. Don't be ridiculous in what you're carrying. And if you do, then we'll start tracking it. It's like most things is, if you work with me as a DM, I'll work with you as a player on what seems reasonable, and that's not a problem. It's usually whenever people are really trying to game the system, and also even as a player, if it doesn't make sense, I'm tossing it. It's like, well, why aren't you doing this? Because this maximizes blah blah blah. I said, because in reality, people don't do that. Like what? I said, look, you have to be reasonable, and you can't be paranoid all the time with your character. Because then at that point, as a DM, I'm like, oh, you get minuses to reactions. Why? Because you always come off as paranoid. You
can have. I mean, to streamline the whole process, you can have little assumptions. For example, you can assume that if your party cross a stream, you've all filled up your water skins. You can assume that.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Well, like most things, is what is the focus of the game? If the focus of the game is something like Forbidden Lands, it's absolutely crucial to track your equipment and things. If your equipment is the main thing. And I think that's what some of it comes down to. And then this is really when we talk about 5e. Some of it just comes down to that 5e really needed a second Dungeon Master's Guide for players that want to play a grittier game, and they never went that way. They did talk about it, but said, hey, we're going to do hardcore mode. This is hardcore D&D. And if
there is hardcore mode in the DMG.
Yeah, most of that stuff is in the DMG.
Yeah, there's nobody in there.
No. Not all of it. It has.
It's not even that nobody reads it, Bear. Nobody will let you play with it. If they learn about it, I
It's the
made
same.
a list of 10 things for a campaign, and only one passed my players. So
See, this is that thing where you and I disagree about being a tyrant at the table. This is the game I'm running. These are the rules I'm using. If you want to play, show up. If you don't want to
do
play,
you play with
we're
random
good.
people, or do you have a regular game?
I have a regular game, but also when I play with random people, I tell them this is the game I'm running. These are the rules I'm using. If you want to play, you're
I
playing.
do
If
not
you're
have
not,
a random game.
Okay.
So
Well, I'm going to say this much as, but that's why I said I wish that they had done a hardcore D&D to attract them. It's like, oh, I'm going to play hardcore D&D. It's like, oh, it's the rules in this dungeon master.
hey, it worked with marking advanced
Yeah.
D&D advanced.
Yeah.
hardcore D&D though implies you might have to get it in a plain brown wrapper at the back shelf, right? Like I'm just saying, be careful on that word.
D&D triple X.
Well, they've already got it.
Hour.
They had it. Adventures in Middle Earth was that.
I have that. It's one of the best iterations of 5e you'll ever see.
Yeah, it's very good.
exactly. Well, those are the things that come into it. But I like the hybrid system more or less, which is where I like the free league. It's like, okay, what do you have to track? I don't have to track every aspect, but the die tracks it. This track.
I'm saying this because I think you and I have talked enough that I can make a joke at your expense and you won't take it personally. But Jesus Christ, I thought I was a free league shill. Dear Lord, man, do you get paid every time you say their name?
He hasn't mentioned Conan once, so I don't know what's going on. I don't think it's actually Omino.
No, I did mention, but since we're talking about resource management, and like you're right for that, Bears. Well, because I like the systems. It's so easy. It's like, oh, for Alien, oh, what's your resource in there? 6. Roll 6 dice. Guess what? Everyone that comes up a little face hugger, you lose in air. So, and then if you lose all 6 amazingly enough at once, what happened? Well, obviously you ripped your suit, and now the air has expanded. Now you're going to die. It's like,
you hyperventilated or something.
Yeah, exactly. Those are things that can come into it, which allow you to work through this. But I don't have to track. Well, how many liters of air did you have, and how much does it do for this? And now we're going. Those are, but that's why I like the slot system. I do like the slot system because it's easy. Some of it really comes down to, is it easy for the players to do and we're saying that they're being honest, but they are kind of absent-minded. Like, okay, what does this do? Okay, well, this one takes 2 slots. Okay, and it gives them enough that they can move things around without overwhelming them on every little detail, which is why everyone talks about the coin encumbrance. Man, that's kind of a pain in the butt if I have to measure every item for coin encumbrance, but it's kind of easy, like, oh, your tinderbox takes up 1 slot. Okay. And they just go, okay, I ran out of slots. I have to get rid of something to bring something else in. Okay, good. That's how we'll play. And it encourages, actually, it makes strength a really, when we talk about stats, when you start including encumbrance, strength doesn't become a dump stat like it does in a lot of games. Oh, like we all talk about charisma. Boy, when you play encounter checks, charisma is not a dump stat. When you play encumbrance, strength is not a dump stat. It becomes really important for that. So that's why I like having all those different aspects.
This is why I don't play D&D.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's no such thing as a dump stat in Against the Dark Master or D6 or any other game that uses skills as their base. Everything is valuable and useful.
That is true. I mean, I like Merc for that reason, because you need to have that variety in the party. And everything has its uses.
Well, even in 5e, if you do the standard point array, your characters, and 8 is not detrimental. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's like
become a dump stat because people hand wave away the encumbrance a lot in 5e. That's the main reason. And intelligence has become a dump stat.
It doesn't determine anything except for your skills, really, and casting ability of wizards. You don't get like bonus languages or bonus spells or anything like that.
It's also because people overdo perception and ignore things. You other learning based knowledge based skills.
Can I just say something and see if we all agree on this or not, just for fun? At its core, 5e has a fantastic engine that once they started building out on it, they made some really bizarre and insane choices that just made it into a less than excellent system in the end. And by the time they got to their splat books, it was broken beyond repair. And hence why we're seeing 1D&D be the massive realignment of the whole thing. But at its core, when I look at something like Adventures in Middle-earth using the same engine, I see that it can be made to have a fantastic game that runs really well.
Oh yeah, I
Basically,
mean,
yeah.
5e is a good system. I like the unified mechanic, and I don't feel it's a bad system. But even right out the gate, they already abandoned parts of their own game that they just wrote. Like, hey, here's this mechanic called exhaustion, and we'll never use it.
Well,
Oh, I use it all the time.
I know
well,
you do, but the
but-
people who wrote it don't.
No, Eli's exactly right with that. Is when I look at how do I want to put it, the way they have cobbled together, because I have realms of Pugmire and stuff like this, and the way that they're doing it, they took the core base of 5e and just went incredibly in different directions that have really allowed it to flourish. Unlike, how do I want to put this? This is why I feel real regret for this is why I said I wish they had a Dungeon Masters 2 hardcore or something like that, where it gives more options for it. Is the players never read the book. Most DMs never read the book. And then they're all shocked when it's in there. Like, well, there's not a rule for critical roles. They're like, there is on X page. Like, I never saw it. Like, did you not read past it? It's fine for the basic aspect. It's the third parties that have really innovated that engine, and unfortunately, WotC has not done that at all. And that's where I think that it's a disservice as far as what people consider core D.
They have grossly mismanaged it, in my opinion.
All I've had to do. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Geek. I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. In the core system, advantage and disadvantage, it's slick. I like.
They didn't invent that.
I know they didn't invent it, but it fits.
No, but they act like they reinvented the wheel with that nonsense.
Well, Advantage was proposed back during OD&D, actually.
Yeah, it's like a Dragon magazine article or something.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Look, I learned everything I needed to do about whether or not I was going to buy any current WotC 5e product or play 5e anymore by simply watching who are the popular 5e YouTube channels and listening to them talk about their games and talk about their little skits they do and all that. Ginny is wonderful. I love Ginny to tears. She's really fun to watch sometimes. But when she's writing songs about, I wrote a song about a monster, and that's what my YouTube thing's about today. It's just like, oh Jesus, 5e is for fucking theater kids. I get it. Okay, not for me.
It's become for theatre kids, and that is due to that is a lot to do with the YouTube influencer.
If everyone wants to be Critical Role, which, and I'll be honest with this, is when I watched Critical Role at the beginning, it felt organic and natural, like people were actually playing, and that's what I enjoyed it. But I dropped out after, halfway through season 1. My friend kept watching it, and he's admitted now. He said it's so entirely scripted, it's lost its authenticity. And I think that everyone saw how much money they made and said, oh, well, we're going to do the same thing. And I went, I used role-playing games as an excuse to be with my friends. And like Eli said, the system isn't really the critical part. I don't like GURPS that much. I'm not playing it because I like GURPS. I'm doing it because I want to hang out with certain people. It's an excuse for that. It's just like Monopoly. I hate Monopoly with a passion. I will play with people.
I mean, flat out, I am going to lose half my players if I try to run another game.
Yeah. Oh, and that's fair. And my friend, he's getting tired of 5e for certain things. I don't think we ever did encumbrance. Now, we did do a little bit if it seems ridiculous, but he just, there's a certain point where you can feel, does this feel right or it doesn't feel right? And people should use whatever system works for them and say, okay, what?
I mean, as you say, it's about meeting with your mates. And on a Monday night, I go and play in a face-to-face game. The DM is learning, he's running 5e, and I'm there because I just want to be there amongst my friends playing face-to-face at a table. Yeah. Now, if they want me to run a game, it will not be 5e. I'm running for them on Monday, and it's going to be OSE. Because I will not. But it's at least that group is flexible to try things. They're happy to try things, which I'm glad for.
I'm going to bring one other thing with encumbrance. If it is easy for the players to get into, it's much easier to get players to try new systems. They're easy for them to understand and grasp. The problem I found with some of them is that once they learn a rule set, they don't want to have to learn another rule set. So if something is very easily explained, then it makes a big difference. That's why the slot system works so well in many cases. That's why I do like the Free League, because it's easier for me to bring new players from a 5e background and they understand how things work. Oh, this is the mechanics. Do I have to learn anything else? No. Okay, boom. If I can teach them a game in 10 minutes, and same thing happens with my son. He's never going to play an Avalon Hill game with me, not once. But if I can do a game where it's got like 2-page rules, he's in. So, that's what goes in.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Eli's talking about, and the rest of us is. But yeah, I'm going to be running a game. I want to play. I want to run a game I enjoy, not what the player.
Wait. Last Adventurer, wait. Daggerheart is a 2D12 system? Oh, fuck, that's hilarious for reasons you don't understand. Because it's an inside joke from my channel, but Jesus Christ. I can't wait to push certain people in that direction now. Go play fucking Daggerfell and leave me alone.
Right. We have come to that point where it is now midnight in my part of the world, which is the correct time, as you are all aware, because you are on the ball. Everyone, Britannia rules the waves. Of course, we did at one point.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. So it is my pumpkin hour, which means I'm going to be bringing this stream to a close any minute now. I want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us. Doof has been in here, and we had DK as well. Neither of those two have got channels to shill, but if you've got a channel, now's your chance to shill it.
Oh, I guess I'm first in the order. So yeah, if you're not familiar with me, I'm Mage's Musings. I do game recaps, theory crafting, general silliness, all with puppets. Tune in. I've got a new episode coming on Friday. My latest recap.
And I am Elfbait. The channel is Elfbait. I stream on Sundays, conversational stuff, just, talking about subjects and the like. I have a Discord as well, which we see a lot. We're getting more activity over there too. I'm just talking about general fandom building stuff for games. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
I'm Bear the Gen X GM. My channel is Bear the Gen X GM. I talk a lot of shit, and I don't give a crap what you think, and your feelings are not important to me. So if you're easily offended, stay away from my channel. Tonight we'll be having a live episode we have every Wednesday called the Four Color Cafe, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. And tonight our guest is going to be Matt Forbeck, role-playing writer, visionary, luminary, you want to call him what you want. We're going to be talking about his new Marvel Multiverse RPG that dropped at Gen Con.
Well, nice.
And Omanal, you haven't got a channel. You just like to get involved in everybody else's channels. Is that right?
He's a professional groupie.
Shit and plug freely.
These nuts, because we're all the same age. So, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. And as you all know, I am the old geek. I am indeed a werepumpkin. I have been rumbled. Can't you tell? I mean, this bulbous head, doesn't that give it away that I am a werepumpkin? And the sort of orange luminescence that sort of makes my head look orangey from this light beside me. I run we simul stream this on a Wednesday. I'm the one who sets it all up, and Elfbait and Mage piggyback on my channel, and Bear, you're welcome to as well if you ever want to simul stream it. That's completely up to you. It has brought people in the past. It shares the love around. I also stream on a Friday night. We play fighting fantasy books and choose your own adventure type books, but chat, make all the decisions. Currently running a Call of Cthulhu adventure, which is starting to get they're starting to get into the meat of it. And I also have a Discord, and we play games in the Discord quite often. Most Saturdays, all day Saturdays, we play games of various types, and I run other games in there various times of the week. And other people have started running games in there, which is the whole point of it. That's why I set it up, for people to get together to join in and play games, as well as have the usual banter and post meetings.
I've got a show for Ye Olde Geek. If you're going to play Call of Cthulhu, he's great at it. Go do it with Ye Olde Geek if you have a chance.
Cheers. Thank you, Eminal. Thank you for the show. But also, I have now finally set up my new computer with my new desk layout, and it can cope with OBS. So I'm going to do a fair bit of streaming of old role-playing games. Just join in the chat and hamper me and distract me, and we'll play those old games. We'll play a bit of Eye of the Beholder, a bit of Ultima Underworld. Started a bit of Baldur's Gate last night. Just Baldur's Gate 1, not Baldur's Gate 3. because Baldur's Gate 1 is, of course, the best Baldur's Gate game in existence, which is great. Anyway,
Can I make
I
us go
think,
Baronet? No.
Well,
So it's not-
at least
No,
the best
right.
one EO Geek has ever played of the Baldur's Gate series.
I've played Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2 multiple times from start to finish, and Baldur's Gate 1 is the superior game.
No,
Because
I was joking that you haven't played 3, so it's the best.
I'm not
one.
going to play 3. There's nothing. Everything I hear. Look, my group on Monday showed me pictures of a bug where characters fall down and lose their lower garments, and I was like, "What?" And somebody has programmed into that game an authentic-looking genitalia.
What?
And there's
Game? I want this. How do I get this?
yeah,
Take
this
my
is
money.
Baldur's Gate 3. And they said, "Oh no, you can actually choose all the features of your genitals as well. You can choose to have size and shape and all that sort of stuff." And I was just sat there thinking, "Why?
What gets me
Why?
about that is they did that, but you can only select a certain number of faces. Don't you think that this would have been better use of your time to actually focus on the faces and what people actually look at? Anyway, well,
Yeah, quite.
I do.
And I it did actually. Those sort of things, them spending time to do that sort of things, makes me wonder what what have they wasted their time on? Why do they do it? Why? Just focus on the game. Focus on the purity of the game itself, and not all that nonsense.
I need to know more about this penis customization feature.
Okay. So that's your job for the night. So,
Woo! I'm going to cancel Matt Forbick and work on this all night. Yeah.
So I know I won't be playing Baldur's Gate 3. You can guarantee that. Anyway, I'm going to get going. So thank you everybody who's been on the stream. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you everybody in chat. And all ones, thank you for your kind gifts to the mage. He has earned it. His channel is excellent. So thank you for those gifts. And once Elfbait has built up his channel, he can get gifts as well. And I know, Bear, you don't want gifts, do you?
No, actually, we're changing it. We're doing a new thing, which I learned from someone else, which is where I'm going to start doing if I get X amount of super chats in a night, I will give away a $25 drive-through RPG gift certificate to one of the random chatters.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah. That's a good way of doing
it. That way
it.
people are gambling a little bit by putting money in to see if they'll win, but they're also maybe paying for someone else to get something good out of it.
Yeah.
And then me, of course, getting whatever's left over so I can actually, buy stuff for the channel and, live.
Anyhow.
Yeah, that put Elf to sleep. Me
All right,
No.
You've been working long hours, haven't you, Eli? That's the thing.
I actually took some time off this week. I actually took Monday off, and then only worked half a day on Tuesday.
Is it finally getting to you? Those 6 days?
Did he lose on, or did he leave?
Who
cut
knows?
out.
Yeah, I had to finally just say I need to take 1 week where I can just ease back, or I'm going to nosedive.
Yeah,
of course.
It happens.
Yeah, Omenal has departed.
But taking the Monday off and then half a day on Tuesday let me go to our weekly family dinner, which I've been missing half of those too. Yeah. So
that's fair play.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to end the stream now. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Later, folks.
Cheers.
Goodbye, all.